right, we are back from lunch. Madam Clerk, item 36.
Item 36 is from the Auditor Controller to adopt a resolution authorizing the discharge of accountability to clear outstanding amounts in unrecoverable accounts receivable and non-sufficient funds checks.
Hello. So this really is, we've worked with departments, and actually last year I just did not have time with everything else that was going on to even bring a discharge forward. So this is covering multi fiscal years. But we have worked with all the departments to try to recover these as much as possible, to stay on top of them, reminding them, squeaky wheel, please send out collection notices, try to get it. And at this point, all possibilities of collection have just kind of ceased. It is something that Tim and I have talked about as well with the tax collector, treasurer tax collector, about looking at some other collection opportunities for things like this. So just because we're discharging it, it's really a matter of getting it off of our books, but it doesn't mean that they don't owe the money anymore. It just means that we're not carrying it as an asset on our balance sheets any further. But we have talked about potentially contracting with a collection firm. If we could get 10% of these types of discharges, that would be greater than zero. So we'll definitely continue to look at that. But most of what you're gonna see, most of the line items really have to do with checks that were written to the county departments that just bounced and we couldn't get recovery on them. Animal services is a big one. They deal with a lot of checks, and they deal with a lot of volume of checks. So that is something that we've talked to them about, working with the treasurer tax collector to do credit cards over there. So I've talked to Brad with the new manager about maybe we need to look at that as an option, and that will kind of mitigate this issue that we've been experiencing. And then outside of that, it's payroll. So what will happen is someone will go out on leave, and the county is still continuing to pay our portion of their health insurance. The employee is supposed to pay for their portion of their health insurance and their dental and vision, and they don't. And we send them bills, and they still don't. And we assume that they're going to come back, and when they come back to employment with the county, then at that point we can go ahead and collect against payroll. But if they never come back, then we're not getting it. So some of these items are also related to that as well. We also had a couple on here where it would be like a county and credit card, and they made some charges, and we can't validate the charges, and we find that the charges are actually not legal charges against the county, and the person also is on leave, and they never come back. So it's just those kinds of situations where we've tried to reach out, we've tried to get the money, we've tried to work with them, we've tried to do payment plans, and we're done. So that's what this is. It's really just a discharge to get it off of our balance sheet, so we're not carrying the asset anymore. But certainly we can work with administration and the tax collector about looking at other collection alternatives.
Any board question?
I do have a question. Rebecca, what is code demand?
What is code demand?
Yes.
So I can have Ed probably speak to that. Are you talking about the $182,000?
Yes.
I'll let Ed, the building official, discuss that.
So you're just taking that off the books. There's a good chance that these still may be applied as liens to properties?
No. There will be no liens for any of those. Those are primarily fines, and we can't lien fines on properties.
Okay.
We can lien hard costs, administrative costs, and physical abatement costs, but not the fines specifically. There's other collection opportunities with any of these which could lead to a judgment, but it's a personal judgment. Nothing would ever go against a property on these.
Okay, so this just cleans it up off your side of the books, of the
Yep.
ledger.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board questions? If not, public questions? Open to the public?
I have the easiest question of all for Rebecca. How much money are we talking about?
So the total amount is $189,542.07. And the bulk of that is $182,000 even, which has to do with code fines.
Does that answer your question? Thank you. Any other public comments? If not, I'll close public comments, bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chair, one quick question for Rebecca. Rebecca, I see that you mentioned $182,000 in building. Are those for permits?
These were, again, I'd have to have Ed discuss that, but my understanding is they were code compliance fines.
Okay. All right,
And I
thank you.
don't know the extent of what types of code compliance violations they were, but they were fines associated with administrative citations.
Does that answer your
Thank
question?
you. Yes.
And so I'm open for a motion.
I would move to adopt a resolution authorizing discharge of accountability.
I have a motion by Supervisor Mills. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Supervisor Garamendi. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Madam Clerk?
Item 37 is from the Office of Emergency Services to authorize the board chair to execute a Fifth Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement between Calaveras County and Tetra Tech Incorporated for arboricultural and tree removal monitoring services due to the Butte Fire incident to compensate for additional tree removal monitoring expenses necessary for compliance with the approved NEPA monitoring requirements and for extended workdays for an additional amount of $793,322.01 and a total not to exceed amount of $5,246,352.01 and a term ending June 30th, 2019.
Jeremy?
Good afternoon, Board. Good to see you.
Anything to add to that or speak of? Or
Well, I'm certainly available to answer any questions that you have about the Fifth Amendment to this contract.
any board questions? Supervisor Garamendi.
More statement, Chairman. I want to thank you and Michelle again for taking the time to explain this to me at length. As everybody here is well aware, I've had my issues with this Tetra Tech contract.
Absolutely.
But I appreciate your approach to it and strategy, how you're going to approach it. And so after throwing a fit for the last two amendments, I'm actually on board with you on this one.
Okay, perfect. Excellent.
I know. Jeremy works miracles, huh?
Supervisor Oliveira.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeremy, thanks for the information. How much of this is going to be reimbursable by FEMA or OES? Rough ballpark figure, or are we just?
Well, we're making sure that all the work we do is in compliance with the federal regulations, and so all of the work should be eligible work. So, I believe that we won't have any challenges there. We've certainly got a strengthening relationship with FEMA, and we're making sure that we're communicating directly with them, and that we can make sure that the documentation is done properly, so there won't be any issues with regard to not being reimbursed based on documentation challenges.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Sure. So it looks like we should be able to knock this out in about 38 days, 40 days. It's about 1,500 trees.
So what is,
Supervisor.
thank you. Jeremy, what is the timeline then to actually complete the Tetra Tech project? Are you saying 38 days? And
Well, so once we get the crews out there and we're cutting, yeah, we're looking at 38 to 40 days, working days. So if they don't work Sundays, for example, you can kind of scale that out. You're looking at 5 to 6 weeks. I expect the next couple of weeks that we'll be able to, that FEMA will approve the removal of these 1,550 trees, at which point we'll then be able to proceed with contacting the contractor, having them bring the men and the equipment out here, and get started from there. So ballpark, maybe 8 weeks from now.
and you're not expecting a Sixth Amendment?
A Sixth Amendment? I don't believe so. No.
Okay.
Any other board questions? If not, I'll open public comments. Any public questions, comments?
I'm sorry, I wasn't able to go and read the agenda packet specifically on this item. Was one of the amendments have to do with local hire? Local hire?
I could probably answer that for you. Well, my understanding is that, of course, a lot of these companies like Tetra Tech will have monitors, and that I think virtually all of their monitors will be local hires. Additionally, P&J, the company that cuts trees, is often using subcontractors who are local firms.
Jeremy, can you speak into the microphone?
Oh, sure. So what I was saying was that Tetra Tech, for the monitoring positions, I believe those are almost entirely local hires. That P&J often is using subcontractors who are local. I don't know the specifics on who they've lined up as their employees or their subcontractors, but those are general industry practices by these firms. So. Oh, and the current contract has a subcontractor, Ganda, doing biological monitoring, and CBMI, that's the Calaveras Band of Miwok Indians, doing cultural monitoring. So I think those are both local area firms. Yeah.
And if I could just add too, given that this is FEMA funding, that explicitly prohibits us from providing any local advantage to vendors.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I wanted to make that.
Yeah, I was going to bring it up.
And so we're just continuing the contract that we already have, and those are their standard practices. So.
Any other public comments, questions? If not, I'll bring it back to the board. District 2 Supervisor, would you like to make the motion?
I know this is going to scare everybody, but I'd like to make a motion to approve this.
All right.
I have a motion by Supervisor Garamendi. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Oliveira. Any other board questions, comments? If not, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, item number 39.
Item number 38 is from the Administrative
Excuse me,
Office
38, I'm
to
sorry.
adopt the fiscal year 2018-19 recommended budget.
All right, and so this is coming in a few items to the board, in part just to make it clear on the different specific items that we're asking the board to adopt, rather than the one single item that came forward with the budget presentation. So that's the reason that we have a number of items there. So it is a little more, might be repetitive for some of the things that I say, but it will just be going through each of those particular items. The first is the main budget. So what this includes then is the budget document and the summary of all of the operating funds that we discussed over the budget hearings in early June. One thing to note then, so what my office did is went through and specifically made the reductions or changes that were discussed in the in those budget hearings, reducing county council's professional services line $150,000, removing the admin analyst position request from my office's budget, removing IT services technician from the IT budget, also reducing the IT professional services line by $27,000. Removing the planner trainee position from planning's budget, removing the office technician from animal services budget. Also recognizing with having our new bills come in, recognized a utility savings of $60,000 for our sewer services for the main campus and the jail. And also recognizing where there was additional salaries, $120,000 in salary savings to the county clerk recorder budget, where we had double counted some salaries. A couple areas to note. One, we did repair errors in budget salary numbers in human resources, probation, and actually identified a smaller one in ag commissioner. In terms of the HR position, we had a limited term clerical assistant in HR that we had discussed at the meeting, the $37,000 position. In talking to Judy about the scope of what that position is doing for her pending capital project, which is the NeoGov recruitment system go live, and also her scanning project, we agreed that we've done this in the past to fund that limited term position as part of the capital project with the Teeter fund. That is a change that was not previously discussed, but I put in and I'm requesting again based on previous practice. We also did add in the purchase of the Sheriff's Office Bearcat into the budget using Teeter funds for the county's portion of that purchase. That'll allow them to get that order going with the roughly year-long lead time. This assumes all of the same revenue projections that I had. I don't know if the assessor was here to make any comment on her roll close. I wouldn't want to make but apparently Rebecca will make the announcement for
I'll make
her,
the
apparently.
announcement. So we had worked with the assessor to try to determine, in a crystal ball where we thought the projected assessed value was going to go up. So what was included in the budget was a 4% increase. And ultimately what it was, and she just certified this yesterday, was 6.59%. We do not have, because I just received it, so my office has not run the calculations based on what that is. It, just kind of a ballpark figure, it's a little over $700,000 to the general fund, but it could potentially be higher than that. We just need to actually go physically through the calculations, look at the AB8 factor distribution, and it's not an easy process to actually calculate property taxes and apportion them. So once we have that information, we will share that with the administrative office and make sure that that is included with final budget. But it is higher than what had been projected in the recommended.
Thank you, Rebecca. Otherwise, those were the only shifts. Obviously, that new revenue is not in this budget, but that will be reflected in final budget when it comes back to the board in September.
Any board questions? Supervisor Mills?
Tim, we were talking about trying to spread the financing of the Bearcat out over several years. So we'll put part of it aside this year and then possibly the final payment next year.
Yeah, I think the goal, at least to show the appropriations there, they have the authority to purchase it. And yes, if we want to then say they can reimburse it, over a couple of years to reimburse Teeter, that is what we discussed.
Okay. And are we still on track to that 5% number that the board had talked about it?
For September coming in, yes. That
Right.
Following the adoption of this budget, July and August's tasks are going to be my office, the auditor's office, meeting with departments and having those discussions about what that's going to look like and looking at some scenarios.
So when we look at mid-year and any potential salary savings, do we want to start having discussions, and I know the auditor might be interested in as well, to look at those salary savings and roll them forward into the PARS account or some other method rather than just allow them to sit within those departments' budgets?
Yeah, that is something that we had discussed about building a policy. I look at this budget, and I've said this publicly, and I've said this to board members, and Tim and I have talked about this. I think this is a year of transition, and we have to starting immediately, making transitions. The cash carry is giving us basically some breathing room to make those changes, to look at the overall structure, to look at our fee structures, to look at revenue options, expenditure reductions, and strategies going forward, and also looking at policies. And one of the policies that we had talked about was a policy in terms of funding PERS and funding that IRS 115 fund. And whether that is taking a percentage of cash carry, if that's a percentage of salary savings, if it's at some point in time. And so I think those are some of the discussions and strategies that we need to start coming up with and getting together and discussing how we're going to do that.
Could you explain cash carry to us, Rebecca?
So cash carry is the cash in any fund, and we mainly focus on the general fund because that is where the biggest discretion is for the Board of Supervisors. So it's the cash that is left in the fund as of June 30th that is not expended, that doesn't have any encumbrance on it. So we had projected around $9 million where we thought we would end with cash carry. And that cash carry rolls over from June 30th to July 1st, and we embed it in the budget. So the budget is based on current year revenue, prior year cash carry as of June 30th, less any expenditures. And that's how we come up with that budget. So the cash carry is really what your leftover net revenue was from the prior year as of June 30th.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
If I might be able to add a piece of clarification too, I know it's the unfortunate coincidence of the dollar amounts too, because I've gotten this question, and in fact I had gotten a couple media questions on specifically what this means. So we have obviously the cash carry, which is, as the auditors pointed out, was very strong. We also had in my presentation a discussion about what I had coined a deficit or a structural imbalance within the general fund. The way that I kind of look at that and qualified that is taking a look at what all of the general funded departments cost us, less any revenues that they might be able to bring in, whether it's grant funds, whether it's collection for services they provide. And that net result is then how much general fund they need to operate. When I looked at the numbers, what we see before we factored in the fact that the cash carry basically filled that hole, is there was still a recurring sustainable revenue difference between what our expenses are and what our revenues are to cover that. And that comes back to then
Yes.
why we're looking at what needs to be done in September.
Right.
But,
So-
excuse me, but to clarify even a little bit more, that only pertains to reoccurring expenses, not one-time expenses that the cash carry would pay off and be done. It would be what the difference is on the continuing going forward.
That's true. I would assume, departments can cut
Yes.
capital asset purchases, they can
Correct.
cut contracts, things that are not staff-related, or rents, contracts that they have to pay.
Correct. So the whole caveat to this, and what it's important for the public and the board to understand, is when we're talking about cash carry, you really want to look at that as one-time funding, right? Because when June 30th comes along, if it happens to be exactly $9 million, we can't assume that June 30th of 2019, we're going to have cash carry of $9 million. It's highly unlikely. It's more likely that, it could be, you tell me, based on your crystal ball, where do we think we're going to be as of June 30th, 2019? So what we have to do is kind of stand back and look at our discretionary revenues and how those revenues are spread across the expenditures and if we're in alignment. And we have, we've consistently been out of alignment for years. And it's just something that we've not addressed. And we, every year we go, whew, we got through that one, and we'll plan next year, or we'll wait till, next year. So I think we've just kind of come to a crossroads at this point where we're having an opportunity with the cash carry that we have. We had a strong sales tax revenue for this year. We had strong TOT with the increase of the Airbnb. We had stronger, we just had stronger revenues than we've seen in the past across the board. And those, even with the strongness of all of those revenues, they don't marry up with the expenditures. We know that the expenditures are rising at a higher rate than what the trend is for those respective revenues. So there's where we have to kind of sit down and look at that and kind of trend that out. And we've also not done historically a really great job with multi-year trend budgeting. So that's something, again, that kind of Tim and I have looked at, and that was a big reason why we wanted to invest in more complex budget software, so that it would give us that opportunity to kind of stand back, project forward, and see where we're going to go.
And that modeling is critical.
Yes.
Going forward, and I'm glad to see we're starting to get in that, and thank you for about the one-time funds, because that was on my checklist as well. The other thing too is that we've been backfilling some of these enterprise for quite some time, and developing the fee scheduling revisions that are so critical has kind of helped to reduce that exposure. So that's something that boards could have done in the past. It's come to a point now where we can do it, and we have that ability. So I appreciate all of the departments that have moved forward in this, like environmental health recently did. But and I know that the building department's working on theirs. There's others that are doing it. So that's how we're going to eliminate those gaps. Is try to be sure that whatever our cost recovery mechanisms are, that they're in alignment with what the true costs are.
And I think there's areas where we don't have a fee that maybe we should have a fee, and we just have had a reluctance to look at that because fees and taxes are not popular. But when you stand back and you say, well, the discretionary revenues are basically paying for services that an individual actually should be paying for. That's kind of how you have to look at it, and we do have instances of that. So there are areas where we probably don't have a fee, that we probably do need a fee. And if we could, again, use this time that we have to kind of make those that analysis and make those presentations, then I think we'll get closer to where we need to be.
You'll never truly balance the enterprises against what their reality is.
Yeah.
But as long as we can shrink that number,
Yeah.
That's money that we can then allocate or use in other ways.
Correct.
So, thank you.
So just to clear, we have a balanced budget. We have money to
We have a
pay.
balanced
We have
budget.
a balanced budget. We have some structural deficits that we need to address going forward. We have some time to look at those.
Yes.
And we were having a request to bring to us a 5% reduction in September to address some of those in the future. So thank you. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yep.
I will open up to public comment. Oh, excuse me, staff comments, I'm sorry. Sam, sorry.
Good afternoon. Sam Leach, Chief Probation Officer. I was here on June 13th to present and respond to questions on probation's budget and the AB 109 budget. Included in that was equity increases for 3 of my managers, my assistant chief and my supervising deputy probation officers. So that's 3 positions. In my budget, I addressed that and also included at the CAO's request and in coordination with their office in my request that those increases would be covered by our SB 678 revenue. And so none of it was a general fund impact. The next day I wasn't present and those positions got lumped in from what I believe was another 8 positions that were considered, and the board then pulled 5-0 in the opposite direction to take those off the table. So forgive me for being confused and hurt, but I was very disappointed in this because I've got, 3 people over there who see one thing one day and the very next day see a unanimous vote against what frankly is a unanimous poll, I know it's not a vote, against what's very well deserved, and 3 people who are not replaceable internally and almost impossible to replace externally if I had to, based on what they're currently getting. So, I'm frustrated by it. I wanted to come say my piece. I'll leave it at that. I realize you don't want to go through and rework the budget today, but I'm still saying my piece and imploring you to reconsider that portion. We covered the difference. There's no general fund impact. It will be a $48,662 draw from SB 678 monies. So I'll leave you with that.
We, kept September budget, we'll revisit it.
Well, hello. So Ed Ballard with the Sheriff's Office. I wasn't at the last budget thing, but I know you guys had some questions and all that other stuff. And I just wanted to update you with what's going on with, you all know where we're at with not having positions filled and all that stuff. So we did change stuff up, and I'm like real jazzed. Yesterday we actually brought 4 people on board at one time. We're due to bring on 5 to 7 more people by the end of August. So hopefully within the next few months we should be fully staffed. And so I appreciate the positions that we did get.
Mr. Chair, Captain?
Aye.
Thanks for coming over, Captain Ballard. I'm going to put that on the calendar. We have that many applicants now. What
had happened was I'm sure you're all familiar with Sergeant Whiting, but she did an open house thing specific to the female correctional officers, and we held about probably within the last couple of months an open house and an open recruitment thing. On that particular day, we had 54 people show up, and wow. Of those 54 people showed up, 42 of them ended up coming and doing the test, and I want to say somewhere around 35 of them passed the test. So, I mean, it was an anomaly, but we're taking full advantage of it. So we've had a lot of people putting in for the correctional officer position. So, and hopefully by the time, we're done with this new process, we'll be able to have all the positions filled, plus enough extra hires to pull in as the attrition rate, because we're never going to lose that attrition rate. So, 5 to 7 a year just on that. So it's going good.
Good.
Right now.
The raises paid off, Captain?
What's that?
The raises help a little bit?
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did.
Captain, don't walk away. You do have some workman's comp positions that are inactive right now?
Correct. I've got 5.
5?
I've got 5. That's the biggest hit on overtime right now is backfilling those positions. And as you know, I got to pay the overtime, plus then I got to pay, or the county's responsible for the 4850 time. Been working with HR. HR has been doing an outstanding job of getting those workers' comp things worked through, getting people back to work, or getting to where I can fill the positions. So I've been doing the jail for, I think this is my 13th year, and this is probably the first time where I think I'm not swimming in wet concrete when it comes to getting people hired. I just hope I'm not being overly happy. But I think we're on our way to getting all the positions filled. And then, concurrently with that, once we get all those things, all those positions filled, everybody stays and all that stuff, probably won't be a lot of cash carry out of my budget.
Okay, thank you.
So keep that in mind, okay?
Any other staff? Seeing none, I will now open to public comment.
I agree with what Captain Ballard said, but I just want you guys to know that the volunteer sheriffs help out quite a bit in the jail. They help out in public. They do a lot of things for us that don't cost us a dime, and we need to recognize those volunteers.
I'll do that right now.
Are you a volunteer?
I'm not a volunteer, but she's absolutely right. I don't think we recognize the volunteers enough. I know that them not stepping in and coming over and helping me out during my manpower crisis over there, it would have been tough for me. And I'm glad they're there, and they do not get enough acknowledgement, especially from me, but you got it.
Any other public comment?
When we talk about a balanced budget, we're talking about filling in a potential deficit with money that's carryover right now. But one thing I want to talk about is that was just brought up on percentages and possible money coming in from the assessed tax values is projected it was 4%, and I think I just heard it was closer to a little bit over 6%. Approximately $700,000 more if I got my numbers correct from what I just heard. Now, looking back on this last year, this could be a potential anomaly. And it's not about marijuana. What I'm talking about is there's potentially 400, 500 business licenses that did upgrades on properties that were assessed because they put in structures and other things in these properties that actually raise the value on these properties. Potentially, these people are having to take these apart as a part of everything they're having to go through now. So my question is, will this potentially in the coming year or the year after that reduce the assessed value of those properties so that this 1 year leap is actually going to work backwards in the coming years because these structures and upgrades to the properties are going to have to be taken down and devaluing the property as a whole?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, it wasn't my intent to take up your time today. However, I'm hearing not quite accurate numbers. So I'm just going to announce for you and for the public, even though I've already emailed you, we did close our assessment roll yesterday. The 2018 assessment roll net of all exemptions, which are homeowners exemptions, church, disabled veterans, and the like, is $7,123,151,558. That represents an increase of more than $440 million over last year's assessment roll, and it's an increase of 6.59%. We are calculating the net return to the general fund of about $741,000. In answer to Mr. Stopper's question, he is correct to some extent, and that is this. Those cannabis businesses that existed on January 1st were assessed in the 2018 roll. We are certainly already getting questions about why we assess those on the assessment roll when 10 or 12 days later you enacted a ban. State law and the California Constitution require that all property be assessed as it existed on January 1st. So I'm just going to use a simple little example. If you and I had a business on January 1st and one of us got sick on January 12th and we had to close the business is still accessible because it existed on January 1st. Do we expect some appeals? Yes, I do. Your assessment appeals board might be quite busy, but their hands will be tied in this case if that business equipment and that business existed on January 1st. In subsequent years, depending on the action this board takes on, agenda item 46, and how the voters may decide, in subsequent years, those values may continue to be on the assessment roll. Likewise, they may not. It's impossible to predict what anybody who is in business will do from year to year. I'm happy to answer your questions about that, but I would just ask you to remember that I don't have a crystal ball, and I really can't predict what will happen. I know a lot of people are trying to predict what will happen with the assessment roll, and I usually advise them against that. Questions?
Questions? Thank you,
Outstanding.
Leslie. Any other public comments?
I apologize, I do not have a computer and I can't get anything online, but in your final budget, was there any increase included for home care providers? The IHSS workers through Welfare Department?
This is the preliminary budget, it's not final yet.
It's not
will be
final.
Finals in September. This is our preliminary budget to get to September, when the state's budget starts, their fiscal year starts, and we know what the state is going to do and adopt for their final budget. So every year we go, and by July 1st, we are mandated to have a balanced budget. And that's called the preliminary budget. And then after September, when the state starts their budget, we will come back and do our final budget for the rest of the year.
So I have to still worry or hound you or whatever?
I think you can get, at least for the preliminary budget, an answer from the CAO on that question.
Okay.
And unfortunately, Kristen Brinks isn't here, but in looking at that budget, it assumes current rate for the IHSS workers. Any changes would be brought forth through the negotiation process with the MOU, which then would come back to the board for consideration and then adjustment to the HHSA budget if it were passed.
So if there are contract negotiations initiated by SEIU 2015, that's what will come into play?
Yeah, it would be the same as it is with any other labor group within the county.
Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Can I just say something real quick?
Can you?
Yeah. Bonnie, just to let you know and anybody else who is listening or watching, that if you don't have a computer or you don't have access to a computer, you can always come into the clerk recorder's office between the hours of 8 and 4, Monday through Friday, and view the Board of Supervisors agenda packets on the computers that are in our lobby, just so you know.
Okay, no other public comments? Seeing none, I'll close public comments and bring it back to the board. Any other board comments, questions? If not, I'm open for a motion.
I would move to adopt.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Mills, second by Garamendi. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving to item number 39.
Item 39 is from the Administrative Office to adopt a resolution authorizing the purchase of certain capital assets for fiscal year 2018-19.
All right, so yes, this item again is bringing back what was a list already presented to the board during the budget hearings. That number has not changed at this point. The total appropriation request for capital assets, and this is for all funds, is $3.754 million. Now, within the attachments, you can see where what that list is, and more importantly, to the far right-hand column is the funding source, just denoting that the bulk of these are not general fund dollars. So general fund represents about $650,000 of that.
620.
Yeah, so
About 620,000 what I have.
my quick
Okay.
quick and dirty rounding says.
I have it written down.
So again, the bulk of this is not general fund, but to the point earlier on those one-time funds, these would be one-time funds across any of these departments that next year, if we were looking for, bringing expenditures down, this would be the first place that we would look.
Board questions? Seeing none? Any public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. Looking for a motion.
Before we do, Chair, I think it's valuable here to note that we're continuing to purchase vehicles for the Sheriff's Department, and that we do that each year and start developing a rotational chain in the system. I know it's been long ignored, but, and it takes a lot of time to get those vehicles functional and on the road. So I see Maria's going to come up and, no, it's certainly welcome.
Good afternoon, Board, Council, CAO Letts, how are you? Yeah, we're trying to make some progress. The vehicles for a long time had not been refreshed and there was no official program. But with DeBasilio on board, he's been trying to add as many as he can. The cost is not so much the vehicle's not too bad, but it's all the outfitting that has to go with it. So you figure for every car, it's not just the cost of an escape or an expedition, it's all the outfitting that the officers need. So little at a time will make a dent. And we thank the board and the CAO for being able to help us to manage the fleet.
Yeah, if we commit to turning your fleet over a 8 or 10 year span or 6 year span, whatever that commitment is, as long as we keep it in the budget every year to do that.
A little bit at a time,
A little
correct.
bit at a time,
And
and then
salvage
we
some
will-
of the old guys.
We won't be
Girls,
sitting
dogs.
on a bulk need. It will be a smaller need over
Right.
time. So,
It's just too hard to do it all at once. You have to take it as much as you can, a little at a time.
okay, thank you, Maria.
You're welcome, thank you.
And if I could even add on that too, you'll notice there are a few even for integrated waste management and other areas within Public
Snow
Works that we're really trying to do just that. Does us no good to never replace a vehicle because then all of your vehicles die at the same time and then you have a big expense that you can't afford.
So the snowplows up in Arnold, those are the most critical need for that area.
But I'm looking over at Judy, who's the risk manager as well, who was telling me about I think it actually might have been a work comp injury of somebody hitting their head on the ceiling of the snowplow because it's so old. And
Judy Hawkins, Human Resources and Risk Director. Yes, we have plows from the early 70s that I have been assured that the seatbelts are intact, but still we had a workers' comp claim last year that the person hit their head on the roof, and so it's something that the equipment does need to be replaced, but we make sure that those are the vehicles of last resort when they have to use them.
Supervisor
Chair?
Oliver?
Don't run away, Judy. Without naming our employee, can you tell me the dynamics of that accident? He hit his head on the roof of the inside cab of a piece of equipment that was equipped with seat belts? Is that what we're saying?
That's what was written down. That's what was reported. But when in plowing, going over something, hit a bump, and he hit his head. I talked with the supervisor. There's some inconsistencies there, but we are making sure that the equipment in the vehicles are safe, so that the seat belts are intact. But we do have some of the vehicles, some of the snowplows are early 70s, and those are the ones that we are getting replaced and having better equipment.
And those just have lap belts and not shoulder belts on them?
Yes.
Yeah.
And like I said, we do not use those when possible.
I just want to clarify the accident, how it happened. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair, I have a comment on the snowplow situation.
Sure.
I've actually discussed this in depth with Scott Anderson. And just for purposes of clarity, we see in the capital improvement, we have 2 dump trucks with plows. Those dump trucks, as equipped, they actually, one will serve the purpose of 2 truck plows, as we are seeing now. So we're going to pick up actually the capability of 4 snowplow trucks plus 1 more for a total of 5 snowplow trucks. So we are increasing and updating our fleet. Unfortunately, we can't do it all in 1 year. So, and I want to make sure we have all seatbelts in them. Thank you.
Supervisor Garamendi, your light's on?
Yes, I want everybody to remember, and for the audience or anybody who's listening, we're moving through these items pretty quick, but there's a 500-page document. We spent three days on it last week, or week before last. So don't think we're just skimming through. And with that, I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
All right. Your motion is
To
accept-
adopt.
Adopt. Supervisor Oliveira, your light's on?
I will second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item number 40, Madam Clerk.
Item 40 is from the Administrative Office to adopt a resolution approving fiscal year 2018-19 recommended budget for special revenue designated funds.
Yes, this item, again, what was featured in your, in the full budget document that was discussed over the hearings. I'll call out again a couple of items here. One is certainly the extensive list here. This is a departure from prior years where going through the process of looking at the chart of accounts when we moved to the OpenGov system, the auditor's office, my office worked hard to try and categorize and identify all the special revenue designated funds out there that fall under the jurisdiction of the Board of Supervisors and that then reside in different departments and have different statutory requirements. One item that I would note here, just for clarity's sake, the estimated fund equity numbers that are included there are just that, estimated numbers. Going back to what the auditor said a little while ago for another item is at this point we kind of do an estimate of what we think that equity is going to be. Then when it comes back in September, that's when we then have those final equity numbers that get slotted into that space. So that's why typically you don't see a whole bunch of activity going on for these funds during this point in time, and you might see more activity then when it comes to the final budget in September.
Supervisor Mills?
Yes, your last number down there on total revenue was 48, the last, I don't have the sheets in front of me, but it was 48 million, now it's 49.
And I'd have to, going back to just our cleanup. So,
Is that what it did?
yeah, what happened, as I had alluded to during the budget hearings, unfortunately, we had to make a lot of minor or manual edits to the budget that was outside of the OpenGov system. Then what happened is OpenGov, we had to work with them to basically match those changes. Through that process, I think there was one fund that was identified as, we needed to include this fund that it wasn't. The amount change was immaterial, but I did recognize that there were a couple little shifts in dollar amounts, in part because when we re-reconciled with the OpenGov system.
Maybe this is a question for the auditor. Could you explain where this money comes from? I mean, it doesn't just miraculously appear in a check somewhere, does it?
No. So the special revenue funds, we have them categorized under GASB 54, which is a fund balance policy that was approved by the Board of Supervisors several years ago. But for the most part, the special revenue funds that we have are restricted funding. It's not locally restricted by the Board of Supervisors, but in fact, it is state or federal funds that we receive that, you know, I kind of tell people we can only use to buy crunchy peanut butter on Tuesday. That's it. You can't do anything else with it. We have funds that specifically can only be used on capital. We have funds that can only be used on a Medi-Cal program. We have funds that can only be used on attorney fees related to environmental, you know, litigation. I mean, we have all these special revenue funds that we have received the money either from a fee that was locally, it could have been locally established by the Board of Supervisors, or it could have been allowed by the Board of Supervisors, but under the allowance by the state legislature. We have funds that are grant funding, could be state grant funding, could be federal grant funding, and then we have a lot of money that is in these special revenue funds that is tied to sales tax allocations that come back through the state controller's office to us, but is specifically tied to programs, whether it's realignment money, you know, 1993 realignment, or it could be 2011.
Yeah, 91 realignment.
91 realignment
and
or 2011 realignment. One of, you know, old realignment or new realignment. So all of those funds cannot be used in a discretionary manner. They have to be used on specific programs, on specific types of activities. They all have to be held in separate accounts, but they're not trust accounts. They're not fiduciary funds because they still are under the governance of the Board of Supervisors. We still have to include them in our audit. We have to track everything that's going in and out of these funds, and there's terms that we have to meet for them.
And additionally, some of these funds are added to every year to some degree. Others don't get an addition. They're just a line item that's been set aside for a specific purpose.
Correct. So most of the ones that are kind of sitting there would be, those are generally locally established committed funds that would have been committed by you as our local legislative bodies. And so that could be the general fund reserve, but it could also be that 27th payroll PERS smoothing fund. It could be, we're self-liability insured, so that's the self-liability fund. There's several funds where there's money sitting there. There's no additional funds that are necessarily going and contributing to it, but that balance is sitting there because it is committed by the Board of Supervisors to be used to offset some activity, whether it's to prove that we have coverage for our insurance, to prove that we have reserves established for cash flow, to kind of meet those best practices under GFOA, so that we have sufficient funds for cash flow. So there's several reasons why those might be there. The other funds that we have get allocations probably on a monthly or quarterly basis, and then are used to some degree, but may not be 100% liquidated every year. And so what will happen is sometimes a department will get funds. It'll go in that special revenue fund, and they have a project or a program that they want to do at some point in the future, but they are kind of accumulating dollars until it gets to a certain point, and then they're going to make that investment 3, 4, 5 years from now.
Okay, great explanation. Thank you.
Supervisor Oliver.
Ms. Callen, I have a question for you. Seeing we're speaking about special district funds in this particular item, could you explain the GAN Act and what that curtails, to funds? And I'm going to talk specifically, and I don't want to point a finger at Mr. Lutz, because I found out that we have a fund that was exorbitant.
To be clear, this is on a special district, not within
Okay.
a special revenue fund. We're not quite on that item yet.
Oh, we're not there yet?
I just want to make sure we're.
You want to stick around for that time, or do you want to
I
answer it now?
can stick around for that one. But the GAN limit actually applies to, the county, and it applies to our special districts, and it applies to external special districts. It complies to any governmental agency that receives tax revenue. So in essence, what the GAN limit is it's actually named after a person with the last name GAN, but it is an appropriations limit. And the basis of the GAN limit, the appropriations limit, is that there is a checks and balance. It's making sure that you are not overtaxing the taxpayer. So if your appropriation, so basically your expenditures, should be $100, you shouldn't be taxing $200. And if year after year it can be proven that you're taxing $200 and you really should only be taxing $100, the basis for the appropriations limit is that you probably, you either need to come up with a plan on how you need to restructure or reduce that tax, or reduce that tax revenue, or you would have to go to the voters to ask for a request to increase your appropriations limit, or you have to refund the tax to the taxpayer. But it's regardless of whether it's a special district or it's the county, that's something that we kind of are watching to make sure we don't hit our GAN limit. And generally, I can't really ever see where we, the county, would hit that'd be a pretty remarkable day for us to hit our GAN limit. But there are special districts that do hit their GAN limit, and we do have a fire district that does hit their GAN limit, and so they have to go to the voters and ask for permission from the voters to actually increase their appropriations limit higher than what is allowed. And then if the voters approve it, then they're fine for 4 years, and then they have to go back and do it again.
Thank you. Very good explanation.
All right, we'll open to public comments on this item. Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Mills,
Second, Mr. Chair.
second by Supervisor Oliveira. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Madam Clerk.
Item 41 is from the Administrative Office to adopt a resolution approving fiscal year 2018-19 recommended budget for the Air Pollution Control District.
I don't see Brad in here, but I see you brought it, so.
And I would suggest then, and that's what I was just conferring back and forth with council, this is the appropriation for the Air Pollution Control District.
So
My
we-
suggestion would be to follow the same procedure that we did earlier today.
Yeah. Is that correct? Even though the board of supervisors approves the budget?
The cleanest and most prudent approach from councils across the state is to do that. I know that because the agenda does identify all the various agencies in which you are sitting on, I know historically we have not closed this meeting, opened the meeting of the other agency, closed that meeting, reopened of another, just for time savings and economy. We have historically just made a reference that the board is acting in the capacity of the various applicable agency as you move forward rather than going through that process. Historically, we have done the latter just for ease. The most prudent for purposes of the record is for opening it officially in the new agency and closing it and then reopening in the next item. This is something that staff will be discussing and bringing back as far as what the most appropriate method would be moving forward for the board to do.
And I understand that, and that's why we did that. We had a conversation, and we did that earlier. But this is approving their budget through the county appropriated funds. So the Board of Supervisors does not have the right to appropriate the money to that agency or that department?
You, in essence, you're, just like you are with the Board of Supervisors approving the budget of the county, because it's a special district, you're sitting as that board approving that budget. That technically the Board of Supervisors alone doesn't have the authority to approve that appropriation.
And I understand, but I had to ask a question just so we know what's going on. So your recommendation is that we recess as the Board of Supervisors, convene as the Air Pollution District Control Board, adopt the budget, and go forward? Is that what you're saying?
That is what I'm saying. It is much more time consuming, but staff will continue to look at that process.
It's interesting you say that because I was at a Tri-Dam meeting in Oakdale just this last week, and that's exactly what they did.
It is a fairly common practice.
Okay.
A little more
That's fine.
time consuming, but.
That's fine. So we will recess as the Board of Supervisors, and we will convene as the Air Pollution Control District Board for this item. Do you want to have any comment on
Sorry.
this?
Yeah, so this is specifically as a special district requesting the appropriation authority of $552,030 for the air pollution control district. And again, this is a special district that county staff provide services directly to, and the district then reimburses the county for that work, so to speak.
Any board questions? Any public comments? Public questions? If not, I'll bring it back to the board. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Mills.
Second, Mr.
Second
Chair.
by Supervisor Oliveira. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. We will now rest as the Air Pollution Control Board and reconvene as the Board of Supervisors for Calaveras County. Madam Clerk, item number 42.
Item 42 is from the Administrative Office to adopt a resolution approving fiscal year 2018-19 recommended budget for districts governed by the Board of Supervisors.
Now, and this is, I was smiling because I was, in light of that, dreading when this one comes up. Because historically, we have lumped lighting districts, CSAs, into kind of one group. Now, for purposes of how this is agendized and the board is convening as these entities, we've been able to do it this way. I don't know if Megan, or council I should say, has a suggestion in terms of this sheet that has both lighting districts and CSAs. Can the board approve? Sorry.
Aha.
As I've previously stated, I mean, for economy, it's what we have historically done is that for this action, we are sitting in the capacity of this entity. For a subsequent action, we are sitting in the capacity of the other agency. It is the most prudent and appropriate approach, the safest approach of opening the item as the various agency that you're taking action as. In this situation, because there are multiple bodies, I think that clarification on the record would be sufficient, and then we will be moving forward differently in the future.
So for clarification then, I guess if we're looking at lighting districts, there are 6 lighting districts. 20200010, which is Arnold Lighting, 20300010, which is McCollum Hill Lighting, 20400010, which is Murphy's Lighting, 20500010, which is San Andreas Lighting, 20600010, which is Valley Springs Lighting, and 20700010, which is West Point Lighting. The total appropriation requests for those districts is $1.097 million, with the strongest outlier, so to speak, being Murphy's Lighting, which goes back to Supervisor Alvera's earlier comment on GAN limit questions.
Supervisor Olivera?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I notice in this budget that we have an appropriations, an estimated fund equity of $568,000. And that is why I question this, and I've discussed it with Mr. Lutz, and I'm going to give him an opportunity to explain, because it is somewhat irregular compared to other lighting districts.
Yes, and this was brought up at last year's budget hearing, and
And the year
sounded like I was
before,
gonna say, it might have been
and the year before, and the year before. So every year I have threatened, if something does not happen, I will be refunding money out of the lighting district.
That's
So-
exactly why I asked about
Yes.
the dam.
So I need the money to be spent in order to not be in violation of the GAN limit. So there are plenty of opportunities for projects. There have been plenty of opportunities for projects. It's just been a matter of getting one foot in front of the other. So I'm confident with the discussions that I've had with CAO Lutz and facilities that something will happen. And I've made my final threat that if it doesn't happen, we'll be cutting checks. Not sure how that's going to play out, but I'm confident that something will happen. And I know that the Murphy's area is very interested. They're being discussed with this, and I'm confident. I'm more confident going into this fiscal year than prior fiscal years that there will actually be movement.
Ms. Callen, now that I'm aware of it, I guarantee you I will become involved. And
Good.
I will share your confidence.
Thank you.
Thank you for your efforts, Mr. Lutz. I understand they're hard projects
Yeah.
being planned now.
We've had very productive conversations, and I say my office, but also Public Works. Conversations with the Murphy's Business Association specifically about different projects along Murphy's. There are a couple of dark corridors that are within the lighting district that would be an opportune spot to add lighting, in addition to PG&E had gone through and replaced some lighting along their right-of-way and their under their control. We'll go through and kind of match that same type of period look with lighting through the district.
Thank you. Thank you for your efforts, Ms. Callen.
I would also like to ask that, Moke Hill's got $77,000 in that account. If you could give us some guidance on the rules and regulations over the next several months.
Definitely.
We'd like to take a look at that too. Thank you.
And I would echo that for San Andreas.
I think the good news is, these are decent balances in these lighting districts, and you know, in principle, they're designed to help make sure that if light bulbs go out, you can go in and replace them. But this is also a good opportunity to look at, you know, upgraded lighting fixtures, LEDs, provide better coverage, but make sure that it's broadcasting downward and not upward, so it doesn't impact the skylight.
And this is why they exist. So I just think it's historically, we've been paying for the light bill with the funds. And we've gotten to the point where we need to pay for more than the light bill. That wasn't the sole intention of having the lighting district. So there just needs to be a plan in place and then moving forward with those.
Public comments? No? Seeing none, we'll bring it back.
Make a motion to
Motion
adopt.
by Supervisor Garamendi. Do I have a motion second?
For all of the districts, or just lighting?
It's the lighting district. Have a second?
I'll second.
Have a second by Supervisor Olivera. Call for a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, passes 5-0. We'll now go on to the county service areas.
Yes, county service areas, 21000010 is CSA number 9, Sunrise Point. 21100010 is CSA number 1, Rancho Calaveras. 21120010 is CSA number 12, Golden Hills. 21150010 is PRD number 1 in Woodgate Indian Creek. 21200010 CSA number 2 is Bar 20. 21400010 CSA number 4 Diamond 20, and 21800010 CSA number 8 Spring Hills. And total appropriation requests for all of the CSAs, $1,951,834.
Any board comments? Supervisor Mills?
Yes, on CSA 4, I know that part of that has to do with the FEMA work that's been done down there. There was a match, and also there's a bridge being constructed on the north side of the north stagecoach, or upper stagecoach. So I understand the reasoning for this, the numbers that are there.
Supervisor Garamendi?
Sorry.
All right. Any other board questions, comments? If not, public comments?
Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. It came to my knowledge that there's a problem in the CSA 2 and Stallion Road. Apparently the end of the road was not placed according to the approved parcel map, and that condition has been there for many years. The road was supposed to provide access to the last parcel on Stallion Road, and instead the road terminated into the adjacent parcel and didn't make a left turn as it was supposed to according to the map. Over the years, nobody cared, and a private driveway was in place at the end of that road accessing the last parcel. But now that owner has improved that driveway, plus added more driveway onto his property, the last parcel, and the parcel which has Stallion Road put into it rather than in front of it is objecting to the private driveway, and it looks like it's going into litigation, probably some sort of action of where the court would determine that that's prescriptive easement. But the plot thickens. According to Robert Packinger, who's the county surveyor, the county should not be responsible because that's a CSA. And so the county would not have any responsibility with where that road was. Well, it turns out the CSA is controlled by the Board of Supervisors, who are the county. So the county not having any responsibility would be a question probably for county council. But in any case, this is coming up, and the county may need to help correct the situation, providing access to the last parcel. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Board Chair, I just wanted, under the circumstances, because of our program and because of the program through IQM2 only allows for one resolution, we have multiple entities that you are essentially taking action on in the capacity as those separate agencies. I would just ask that if, as you move forward, that for the record, for the clerk's sake, that the same, if you're inclined to vote the same way that you previously did, that the same motion and the same seconder be consistent throughout for purposes of our record keeping and us having to work within this program that we are currently working in.
But that is just for the lighting districts and the CSAs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's just for this item.
All right.
Chair, I might note that, to the speaker's point, there is a whole lot more to the story, and it's being worked on. So it'd be a no comment at this point.
So that being said, looking for a motion, hopefully from the same person. As it was you and Mike. Yeah, you,
I make the motion.
a motion by Supervisor Mills,
I would second.
a second by Supervisor Oliveira. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
I'm sorry, that's not the motion and the second that I had.
Oh, what'd you have?
For the lighting districts,
Yeah.
the motion was made by Supervisor Garamendi, and the second was made by Supervisor Oliveira.
I was right.
Will you withdraw your
I
motion?
I withdraw my motion. Withdraw the second.
I withdraw the second.
I would like to make a motion.
All right, I have a motion by Supervisor Garamendi.
I will second, Mr. Chair.
Second by Supervisor Oliveira. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Could have really threw in, somebody said no. That could have really.
Could have really jammed up the process.
All right, moving on to Copperopolis Benefit Basin.
Copperopolis,
Copperopolis.
sorry, yes. Yeah, there are a few more.
Valley Springs Benefit Basin is next.
We can, yeah. So the Copperopolis Benefit Basin, 10260010, sorry, you guys are making me laugh, is Copperopolis Benefit Basin, total appropriation $1.104 million.
Supervisor Mills.
And just to that point, the roundabout is not included in that cost.
Based on the cost, I would speculate no, but
No, I just wanted to ensure that the benefit basin was not paying for the roundabout, it's being paid for by Castle and Cook.
yeah, no.
Correct, okay.
Any board questions? If not, public comments on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. I'll need a motion by Supervisor Garamendi and a second.
Sorry, Jess. Your district, Trish would say you get it, but I make a motion to approve.
Supervisor Garamendi, you have a motion.
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
Second by Supervisor Oliveira. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to Valley Springs Benefit Basin.
Yes, 10270010, Valley Springs Benefit Basin, total appropriation request $823,000.
Any board comments? I don't have any. Not, public comments? Seeing none, bring it back to the board for a motion.
Again, I apologize to Supervisor Tofinelli, this is his district, but I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Supervisor Garamendi. Do I have a second?
Second by myself.
Second by Supervisor Oliveira. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to CMCA JPA.
Yes, those are two org key items, 10910010 and then 10910060. The total combined appropriations, $257,553.
Any board comments? This is the Calaveras Mariposa Community Action Agency. This is our contribution to that agency for the funds that came from the state allocated for it. Any public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Garamendi,
Second.
second by Supervisor Oliveira. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to in-home IHSS.
Because this is a comprehensive list, the next item is going to actually be specifically for this one, so we can skip this one, and obviously we already did Air Pollution Control District. So it just leaves Fish and Game.
Okay.
So Fish and Game, 1110-1560, the Fish and Game Commission. Total appropriation request at this point, $3,215.
And this money is for the fishing derby, the children's fishing derby yearly. Any board comments? Not, any public comments? This is money for the annual fishing derby. If not, bring it back for a motion.
So moved.
A motion by Supervisor Garamendi, a second by
Supervisor Oliver, Mr. Chair.
Oliveira. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. All right, we wiped through those, and now we're going back to in-home supportive services.
Which would be the next
And
item.
Air, we've already done air pollution, so in-home.
That one's the next item.
43.
Item 43 is from the Administrative Office to adopt a resolution approving fiscal year 2018-19 recommended budget for the In-Home Supportive Services Public Authority.
CAO Lutz.
Yes, so, oh, you're right. Do you want to adjourn and reconvene?
Oh, yes, we will adjourn and reconvene as a Board of Supervisors. Or, excuse me, IHS Services. You're-
Yes, this is for the IHSS Public Authority program specifically. So this is for the total appropriation request for the public authority. Total amount $726,982. I also noticed Kristen Brinks is here if there are questions specifically about the public authority program.
Any board questions? Any public comments? Public questions on this item? IHSS.
Bonnie's got it. Bonnie.
Just a question. It seems to me last year the budget was like 500 and something, and now it's 700 and something. What would that increase account for?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Kristen Brinks, Health and Human Services Agency. It's important to note that that $700,000 number includes also reserves. The actual operating budget for the public authority is about approximately $546,000. Last year was about $503,000. So the operating budget again is about $546,000, which is a little bit which is much closer than what we proposed last year. The increases are due to increases in A87 costs and negotiated wages for employees.
Okay. Any other public comments?
George Fry. I was the chair of IHSS in the past year. I don't know what the negotiated wages are. And number two, I don't understand why the IHSS committee doesn't have any say in the budget. Thank you.
Kristen Brinks, Health and Human Services Agency, to address the first component. That is the county employee through SEIU negotiations that I was speaking of. And the second question, I'm not sure how to answer the portion of it. So, but we always welcome working with the In-Home Supportive Services Advisory Committee, work with them on many things, so.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Any board comments, questions?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Supervisor Garamendi. Do I have a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
A second by Supervisor Oliveira. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. We now recess as the IHSS Public Authority and reconvene as the Board of Supervisors. And we will move on to item number 44.
Item 44 is from Human Resources to adopt a resolution authorizing changes to the position control list for fiscal year 2018-19 recommended budget effective July 7, 2018.
Judy Hawkins, Human Resources and Risk Director. And so this item is a resolution approving the position control list. These are the positions that were discussed and approved at the board hearings. It does not include any of the positions that we discussed to bring back at final budget. It also is approving the ranges, salary ranges, and job descriptions that go along with the new positions, and any updated job descriptions for positions that were, we had a position that were, series were assigned to, such as the plan examiners. We made a 1-2, so the job description was updated and was also attached.
Any board questions? Public comment? Any public comment?
Hi, I'm Shauna Towler, a concerned resident of District 5. When reviewing this resolution with the reclassifications and restructuring, I've noticed in the administration office, positions 0207 and 0208 were reclassified from a principal administrative analyst and senior administrative analyst to deputy CAOs. Those positions each show an increase of salary of $12.90 and $17.20 per hour respectively. However, the current org chart that was provided by the CAO's office, or by the Office of Administration, shows that there's 2 administrative analysts. So it looks like the current positions available are underfilled, which would be the principal administrative analyst and senior administrative analyst. I don't understand as public why this wouldn't be filled with the current positions instead of reclassifying them. And also, if they're currently underfilled, the reclass is an increase of $21 an hour from $27 an hour to over $48 an hour. So it's a $21 an hour reclass for positions that don't seem to be currently filled according to the org chart. Per County Code 2.64110, the recruitment and establishment of procedures and techniques, it does state that the CAO shall establish recruiting procedures and techniques to secure qualified individuals and applicants and other candidates for employment in county service as applied. I'm just wondering if those procedures and techniques were followed. I would think this type of position would be, with this level of management, would be something that would be advertised for, recruited, or at least open to the public. And the final question on their budget is, finally, with these 2 reclasses and only 1 retirement, how is the expected salary increase only increasing by $13,000 for administration? At the lowest pay scale, showing only 1 principal administrative analyst increasing, it results in $26,000 just in salary costs, not in actual cost of employees. Thank you.
Either one.
I figured Judy and I could both answer pieces of that because they both overlap. The reclassification is based on what the position is allocated currently at. That's why it's listed the way that it is, as reclassifying from a senior and a principal to the new positions that they were at. You can always underfill positions, but it's going to be based on what the classification schedule or the class listing and approved positions were. In terms of the actual savings from the reclass, part of that is also the other reclassification, the deputy CAO over solid waste. is going to be over solid waste, which is charging 90% of that time into the solid waste fund. Still a savings in my office and a dramatic savings in solid waste given the overhead that was charged in there before.
And the reclassification is the same as we do in many offices, where we will go into the department and make sure that the reclassification that's being requested, that the employees meet the MQs of the position, and that they have the skills and abilities to do the job. And HR did that, and the employees do meet the skills and abilities, and are doing many of the job duties that they are being assigned to already.
Thank you.
That's funny this gets brought up because this is something I've been looking at for a little while. So just for further clarification, you're claiming a savings in the administrative branch. You're setting one person over at integrated waste, which pays for 90% of their salary. So effectively, administration isn't paying into that, but we're taking that 90% of that salary from someplace else. So it's still costing the county from a different direction overall.
It is not general fund. Sorry.
No. It's specifically integrated waste, which is restricted funds. Absolutely. It has to be used for that certain issue. And as long as that gentleman that's been put in that position is working on that certain thing during that whole time he's taking that 90% salary, we're within compliance of expenditures. On to those other two positions that have been reclassified. I just understood HR said that they made sure that they fit those positions and that they qualify for those positions now for the reclassification. Did you change the job description prior to vetting that? The job description for those positions, was that changed prior to?
Answer first, or because I don't want to run his time. I don't understand change the job description at what?
Provided Deputy County Administrative Officer.
Mm-hmm.
You have a definition, distinguished characteristics, examples of duties. This is what a job description is.
Yeah.
Was the job description changed recently?
It was brand new job description that was developed.
Okay, so there was no freestanding job description for that specific duty.
Yes.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. Any board comments, questions? Supervisor Mills?
As a CAO can tell you, he and I had a fairly long conversation on this whole structure and how it works, and I am fairly confident that what he's asking to have done here will best serve the longer range needs of the county as we go forward. I do not see this as creating a structural problem for us in the out years or the years beyond, as long as we adhere to how you're planning to make this work. There's many pieces that we're leaving on the table simply because we don't have the manpower to focus on them. And I'll give you an example of that. It will be purchasing and contracting policies. So there are a lot of pieces here that can kind of slip through our fingers simply because we don't have the personnel in the right place at the right time to handle the need. I'm just making a comment.
Well, I think we had a lot of comments. We had a long discussion on this one back last meeting that we had that lasted 3 days. We had a lot of input and a lot of talk on the situation. So I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Mills.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Garamendi. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 45.
Item 45 is from the Administrative Office to adopt one of two resolutions, either adopting the Cal Waste 4.23% rate increase or rejecting the Cal Waste 4.23% for either adopting or rejecting 4.23% rate increase for contract year 2018-19.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I have a disclosure to make that although I wasn't here during the presentation at the board meeting last week, I did view the video in its entirety regarding the presentation. I'm familiar with the information that was presented there.
So you're up to date on?
I am up to date on the issue and on the agenda item.
Okay. Brian, you have anything to say? I see your name as the contact person bringing this forward.
I do, and I apologize for coming in just a little bit late. For item 45. As you know, as the board is aware, this was discussed a couple weeks ago. We have representatives from Cal Waste here today, and of course we had representatives of Cal Waste on 2 weeks ago. And so essentially what is before the board today is we have two resolutions as directed by the Board of Supervisors for consideration regarding the increase for the 4.23% Cal Waste increase. Option one, only two options today. Option one is for the board to concur with the 4.23% increase to the users of the Cal Waste system. That equates to a 93-cent increase per can, so per month, increase to the customer. The other option, and there's two resolutions again, the other option is for the board to consider taking some of that funding or all of that funding and taking it from the Integrated Waste Management Program. Now, I will be honest with you, I'm not recommending that. I'm still doing the fiscal analysis of IWM. Everybody in this board and in the chambers realize we have a $150 fee per year on our taxes for the Integrated Waste Management Program. That was established, I want to say, in 1991. Quite frankly, there are quite a few programs in place today that we didn't have then. Case in point, I was up at Red Hill today, where we have a yard waste program where we have our loaders working with a tub grinder to grind up the material so they can go down to Rock Creek, and we'll probably use that as alternative daily cover. 1991, we didn't have those programs, and we certainly didn't have the recycling program. So, barring getting into the finances that I really need to get into deeper for IWM, again, I can't, in good faith, recommend that the 4.23% increase come out of the IWM program. And if it did, it would come out of the two elements, the 3% franchise fee that is paid back, you'll notice in your resolution, is paid back to the county, as well as the recyclable program, the 90% of the recyclable recovery program. So with that said, again, the board has two options in front of them today, option one and option two. You know what your IWM representative is recommending today.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
The 93-cent increase has to do with residential.
That's correct.
Not commercial. So what are the increases? Because I've yet to see what, if any, if there are increases to the commercial.
Actually, that was brought up, I want to say, by Cal Waste a couple weeks ago, and they were showing, of course, the increases to the residential, and then there are also increases to the commercial. Is Cal Waste here? Would you like to come speak to that specifically, Jack? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Jack Fiore, California Waste Recovery Systems.
The increase is across the board 4.23%. On the commercial side of the services we offer, there are several hundred, literally several hundred commercial rates that are in the rate schedules for Calaveras County, and each of them will be increased by 4.23%.
So the increase to, and I'm going by what we were presented
Uh-huh.
a couple weeks ago, the 1 cubic yard per week, the 7258, would increase by about $3.15.
Yeah, actually, that $74, that number on there is the new rate, so you'd have
Oh,
to
that
back
is the
out
new rate?
4%. So it would be somewhat, a little less, probably $3, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Any board questions? Comments?
Chair, I would have a comment to this, and that is that if the board is interested in wanting to reduce the franchise fee as a way to cover some of these costs, that's a one-time reduction that would go on for a long time. And that's number one. Number two is, how many other times could we do that?
Right.
And how would that work? Because
Well-
literally, if we take it out of that franchise fee is going for other things
Right.
in our books.
Right.
So if we take it out of there, those other things are not going to receive any funding, or they're going to minimize the funding out of those, and it's going to put a crunch on us in another direction. So
Absolutely. I think both those things would happen. First of all, some or all of the funds that you took out of the franchise fee as rate relief wouldn't be there next year for you to do that again. And the mechanics of how this would work would require that 12 months from now, when we're here talking about the 1920 rate increase, the first step we'd have to do is re-implement the 4.23% increase that we're talking about today, and then from there it would go up whatever next year's numbers, would be another 2.5% or 3% or whatever that number is 12 months from now. So, yeah, the funds would be gone, and there would have to be a reconciliation prior to applying the next rate increase. You're correct.
Supervisor Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We discussed this a week ago. I really did like option number 3, where we get to go renegotiate, but it's very clear that that's not an option. The contract is what the contract is. Our former board put that together. There was a lot of pushback in my community about rate increases. They're not responsible for this contract. This board is. I really think we have to, I recognize that down the road we're going to have to settle up, but I think at this time I would recommend number B, or letter B, which is us eating it rather than the taxpayers.
I want to touch a little bit on what Supervisor Garamendi just said and what we discussed last week as far as negotiations. I went back through this contract, and there's no clause that specifically prohibits negotiations at all in here. So in any contract, unless it specifically excludes something, as long as both parties are open to discussing it, then it is a possibility. And so, this board expressed some willingness to do some negotiations, but it was the vendor that shot it down. And I just want to make that publicly clear to the people out there that we offer to do negotiations, and again, the contract does not specifically exclude that. It does not in any way mean that we can't at some point, even going into the future, since this contract is pretty tied for at least the next 8.5 years and possibly 10 past that we would have some open door instead of trying to do some negotiations, instead of continually passing this on to the end users, that some of those people are in very tight fixed incomes, and are facing a lot of different increases through a lot of different agencies, that we may see a lot of code violations showing up in here simply because people could not afford to pay for trash removal on a regular basis, and their neighbors are turning them in based solely on the fact their income prohibits it, especially being fixed in the older generation here in the county and a lot in my district, and I know other districts too. So I'm asking Cal Waste to at least have an open mind on some type of negotiations going forward, at least sit down and talk to us about it. Again, the contract does not prohibit that in any way. It does not even bring it up in there about it. It does tie it to the BLS. Even some of that I have some questions on, but I'll hold those off for now. So those are my comments going forward. Any other comments from the board?
Myself, I suggested last time we were talking about this to split the 3% and we take half an inch, 1.5%. I know it's symbolic because we're talking $75,000 that we'd be picking up the cost on. I know Brian don't want to hear that he's going to have to lose $75,000. That I've been here before when we actually bought dump trucks and build them off to the landfill and put plows on them to remove snow. So I know we've rated that funds quite a few times for other projects.
And if I may jump in real quick on that, and thank you for that comment. The 3% this year was $150,033. And then as far as the recyclable reimbursements, and that's the 90% brought forward to you by Section 5.08 of the contract, the revenue of that this year was $212,893. So, excuse me, the total is $362,926. If we were to take the entire $211,546, and that's the whole thing, from the two funds, okay, you got the 3% franchise, you've got the recyclables as specified under Section 5.08. If you take those two together and take the $211,546 increase, and IWM pays full freight, the revenue that if we were to stay consistent with this current year for next fiscal year or next contract year, okay, which is July 1 through June 30, the revenue to IWM instead of $362,926 would be $151,380. So it's still a significant hit, so I would just, and if for some reason we were to split the difference between those two, the hit to IWM would be $181,463. I shouldn't say hit, the revenue would be $181,463, even at 50%. So I just want to reiterate to the board that again, there's a significant impact to IWM. I understand the both sides of this issue. So I have to argue for my IWM program, so I would just remind the board that 19 months ago, rates went from $10.50 a month to $22, and that was really, really, really significant. Okay, and therefore the concern by the public, and I certainly recognize that. Today, again, it would be going, instead of from $10.50 to $22, it'd be going from $22 to $22.93. So it's not palatable, I understand, but it's more palatable than certainly more than doubling the cost like we did last time. So with that said, that would be the comment that I would need to make on behalf of IWM.
Brian, your figures here that you were just giving, was that just based on the 93 cents and not the commercial increase?
It was just for the residential. The 93 cents is just residential. And also, in the past, 19 months ago, it was $10.50 to $22 a can. that is significant. Today, it's $22 to $22.93, which, again, I understand is not palatable, but it's much more palatable than certainly what we experienced 19 months ago. I think it's also important, and I know that Cal Waste brought this up during the presentation, that they've actually recognized, albeit small, an increase in their clientele, even with that increased cost. So again, you know, I realize that this goes back to bigger issues. Part and parcel, and this board and other boards have heard about how outdated our parcel fees are, that kind of thing, and we are not there yet. For me to give specific recommendations, I will be coming back to the board in the future, kind of giving the board an update about just where IWM is, where we've been, and where we need to go, and what we're accomplishing in the interim. So again, that would be my preference. Completely understand where the board's position is on this as well.
Supervisor Oliveira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a contract with this vendor, and I wasn't able to review the entire contract. In fact, I can't even get it on my board packet. But are we violating any terms of that contract by saying, well, we want to renegotiate it?
Well, I think
as a county, as one party, that's my concern here.
Well, I think Supervisor Tofinelli is correct. I don't think there's anything in this contract that says that it cannot be renegotiated. I do know that the council also was aware of the original contract as well. My review of the contract, I don't see anything in there that says, you know, it's not open to renegotiations. But again, I'm not an attorney, so I see somebody's light on.
Please.
Just for clarification, the terms of the contract are what they are, but the term as it relates to modifications or amendments, it provides that the procedure for amendments, and just for clarification purposes, this board and staff are typically working under the typical amendment provisions of our standard contract template, which essentially say any amendment to this contract, that basically any contract can be amended with the approval of both parties. In this specific contract, the terms are a little different than our standard templates. And in this contract, the procedure or the provision of the contract states for the procedure for amendments, modifications, extensions, or renewals is if during the term of this agreement there are statutory, regulatory, or other changes that significantly affect the services provided by the hauler pursuant to this agreement or the cost thereof, the terms of this agreement shall be subject to the rate adjustment protocol upon initiation by either party in accordance with the extraordinary review provisions of Section 3.06. Any change, amendment, modification, extension, or renewal shall be in writing and shall be executed by the duly authorized representatives of both county and the hauler. So, although we are traditionally used to being able to negotiate amendments to any of the county contracts, the way that the language of the amendment provisions of this specific contract, there are a few more hoops that you would have to jump through, and the terms are a little different than what the county is traditionally used to having in their contracts. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
But
I think what we were discussing about negotiating was the amount of what they're requesting for their increase. And not a total, and that would be for this time, for this particular increase, not going forward as each year goes by, but this particular increase here from 93 cents in residential to whatever we can negotiate or even open negotiations versus changing the whole contract itself. And as you know, in a contract, if both parties are willing, that negotiations can happen.
Certainly, this contract does have specific provisions as far as how to calculate a rate increase. So if there was going to be any kind of negotiation as far as how the total amount of a rate increase was determined, the actual contract itself would have to be revisited to adjust the basis or how a rate increase is calculated. Does that make sense?
That would be part of the negotiation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Supervisor Oliver, your light still on?
No, it is. I like to hear from the contractor.
Supervisor Clapp, your light's on? You have any questions before we go?
Yeah, I just think that, our return on the recycles is going to drop drastically because I know our recycling stuff is dropping. So we're talking, $212,000. That might be $50,000 next year, so that's still in the air too. So imagine that that'll be changing next year too, so.
And I think it's a very good point about the market changing, because it is changing where maybe there was some revenue in the market before for recyclables. Today, we're actually, as I understand it, paying to, at times, get rid of some material.
And then also you got to figure that these gentlemen, I don't want to be their apologist, but, if I enter in a contract and I had to start buying equipment, I had to start doing, construction on buildings and stuff to get that done. And then, all once they come back, hey, we're wanting to change the thing. I mean, it's a long-term project, that we're in with them. We're in with them for another 8 years, possibly another 10. So I don't know how you get around that. I mean, I didn't make the contract, but, it's a contract that we're with. I don't know how you get around it.
Jack, you want to say anything? Sure. Supervisor Oliver may have some questions for you.
Well, I think most of what I'm about to say, has been covered. I feel like Cal Waste negotiated in good faith 2 years ago with the county and came up with a solution that met the needs of all parties, the county and Cal Waste. The county was well represented last year by an attorney that specialized in solid waste, and she did a very good job, in our opinion, representing you all. If I was in to ask for a rate increase based on our expenses over the last 19 months or more than 19 months, that number would be, in terms of a wish list number, would certainly be more than 4.25%. We've had significant increases. Our health insurance earlier this year went up 50%. Our general liability insurance next month is going up 40%. These are real expenses. We're an employer in Calaveras County that has given pay raises, that has operated from the perspective that we at least knew we were going to be getting some kind of an increase in July of 2018, because that's what our contract allows for. And I understand what you're asking for, but at the same time, I do feel like we negotiated this once, and I'm not sure when you open this door how we continue to spend more than the county a year from now is willing to give us. I don't know how that would ever be sustainable in the long term.
Thank you, sir. I have a problem, and that is, if we've negotiated a contract and it's a term contract, and someone's unhappy with the terms, and the contract terms indicate that both parties must be in agreement to negotiate, I have a problem breaking a contract. And I know that sounds pretty drastic, but I'm not buying into this. Let's change the contract because we think we need to renegotiate. I'm very uncomfortable with that. Contracts are contracts. We should be going into those, our eyes open, with the best information when we sign that for the period of the contract.
Supervisor Oliver, I just wanted to clarify, staff is not recommending that the county certainly breach contract. There are terms, and the two options before the board today, the two resolutions before the board today are viable options within the contract terms, either to approve the rate increase or alternatively for the county to reduce the franchise fee amount proportionately. So both of the two options that are before the board today are certainly within the bounds of the contract terms, because ultimately, the amount that is being needed or requested by Cal Waste it's going to be provided to them. It's either by increasing the rate or by decreasing the franchise fee.
And I misunderstood Supervisor Tofinelli's. I was under the impression he wanted to renegotiate that, so I apologize. Now I have a better understanding of what the issues are.
One of the options last week.
Mhm.
Okay, it presented to us.
Okay.
And Jack touched upon it, and I touched a little bit further when he was talking about it. So it was one, we had 4 options last week.
Right.
And one of them was, so, that's what that was about.
Okay.
Okay?
I have a better understanding now.
All right, at this time, we'll open it to public comment.
Okay. Shauna Towler, District 5. Going back on October 11th, 2016, Resolution 16177, the board established the franchise fee of 3% in connection with the agreement between Cal Waste and Calaveras County. That resolution stated 3 things specifically. The franchise fee would be deposited into a designated fund to be applied to and provide revenue to the county integrated waste management system. 2, the franchise fee is not a property-related fee, and participation in the curbside program is purely voluntary. And 3, the franchise fee of 3% total gross revenues of the agreement is found to be an appropriate value to achieve program goals, provide additional revenues, encourage participation, expand legislative compliance, and keep the maximum amount of solid waste within the legal disposal diversion streams. I know that any price increase is never popular with the public, but I'd like to follow up on those 3 points and implore you that you must take option 1 and pass that price increase on to the public. Integrated waste, from the budgets that have just been passed, can't afford to eat the 3% of that 4 1/4, and then what are they going to do next year? Following the recent budget hearings, Integrated Waste Management's budget for the 18-19 fiscal year is requesting $2.3 million from the cash carry fund. Revenues show $6.4 million with expenses at $8.5. If they take that $2.3 million, which Auditor Rebecca Callen mentioned earlier today, the cash carry is a one-time transfer, that fund is going to go down to under $200,000. So there will be nothing to take from next year. The franchise fee is not property related. The solid waste parcel fee, the last time that went up was in 1990 when it was $140. In 1991, it was increased to $150. It has not been increased in the last 17 years, but in the last 17 years, 42 recycling programs have been implemented to comply with state mandates requiring 50% diversion by landfills. The state is requiring 75% of waste be diverted by 2020. Commercial businesses are required to participate in mandatory commercial recycling with no increase to the solid waste fee, not even with inflation considered. Integrated waste still has to comply with all the additional funding. If you were to just keep up with inflation, that $150 would be $277 now. And that's without all of the increases. Between the 3% franchise fee and the money received from the sale of recyclables in 2017, Cal Waste paid Integrated Waste $412,000.
Thank you.
If that's gone.
Thank you.
From what I understand, the $150 per residence fee across the county on the sus tax values equates to something close to $4.4 million per year. We've not addressed our cell in a long time, and understanding the closure of the old cell and the opening of a new cell, we have a little over $2 million set aside for the solid waste facility out of a total of $6 million overall in that budget, approximately, and I don't know if I have exactly the right numbers. But to close the old cell, will cost over $2 million. So we don't even have anything to open up the new one with. It's a problem. The funding, I mean, as Shauna just explained to you, is working backwards. And the compliance with the state laws that are being put forth are putting us farther backwards. And it's going to cost us more and more in the future to try and comply with state laws, or we're going to get fined, and that's going to cost us. It's a conundrum. The raise in the rates, I saw last time they raised the rates in I believe it was 2016, around where I work off of Hogan. There's an immense amount of property out there. There were so much trash dumped all the time. We're having to report it, everything else. But my question is, does anybody have the number of actual loss of people from that, or did we gain more people after that? That's a good question, because the rates were increased far more than what we're looking at increasing this time. Do we lose customers and then gain more back, or what's the number on that? That's my question when it comes to it. Do we have those numbers?
What I can say just from the staffing standpoint, I do remember many years ago that IWM had, I want to say, 2 or maybe even 3 dedicated engineers. Today we have 1. We are finding it difficult to keep our staff fully staffed at Rock Creek. One of the things I discovered this week with Gamby and the county running the yard waste facility, our person was out for the yard waste facility on a personal issue, and I went to the manager down at the on-site manager at Rock Creek and said, we must always have a county representative when we have our door open, and the comment was, well, we didn't really have the staff to send there. Now that's something for me to solve, and I recognize that, and I will solve that, but that's kind of where IWM is today, and I would like to thank Shauna for having those stats, because she has worked in this program for some period of time. Again, I think it's eye-opening. As I move into this program, it's eye-opening just where we are in the program, not just the financials, but even the day-to-day operations. I hate to tell on myself, but you know, we're grinding up at Red Hill today, and we have 2 loaders up there, and both of them went down today. So it's a picture. It's a snapshot of a bigger picture is what I'm trying to say, and I recognize it's going to take some time to resolve that. But again, I think it's important that the board be aware that certainly if we take this out of IWM, we don't know what the recycling market's going to do next year, pursuant to what Supervisor Clapp was stating. It's a real good point. It's out of the IWM fund. I realize it's not general fund, but it's directly out of the IWM fund. And IWM is just not really in a good place to say, well, we'll just take the hit. I mean, if that's the decision, then certainly that's the decision. We respect that. But I just want the board to be aware that IWM has a lot of work to do. So.
Public comments right now. Any other public comments?
One thing, I'm not changing anything. My question wasn't answered, and I would assume the integrated or the Cal Waste guys would be able to answer the question.
We'll get to you. Okay. Next public comment.
Now, I ain't real smart, and I'm getting stupider every day, but I'm really confused. I'm really interested in the dump, garbage, recycling, litter pickup, and all of those things. So if I'm confused, maybe other people are confused too. The contract that we have with Cal Waste, do they pay the county for using the landfill? Or do we pay them? We don't know?
We'll answer the question.
Okay. Then I have some follow-up questions depending on what that answer is. when it uses the landfill, if it uses the landfill, how much does it pay on the contract? Does it pay by the load? Does it pay yearly? Because I know this is only talking about what your Cal Waste is going to be charging the customers, but if we're not recouping what it costs through residential, the $150 a year that property owners have to pay, how do we pay for all of this? They're talking about closing a cell and opening a cell. Money, that's what I'm asking about. How much?
Alice Gallant Taxpayer Association. I have not read the contract, but I'm somewhat familiar with principles of contract. The contract is never written, never supposed to be written, to place one party at the mercy of another. The courts usually rule that those who write the contracts are responsible if there is conflict in that contract. In this case, when you have a contract which is bid on, if it's in a short period of time, it could be lump sum, and it doesn't have to have a lot of variabilities in it. But if you have a franchise contract, which is over years, maybe decades, it needs to have within it built-in adjustments for increase in costs of the contractor. It just makes sense. So in the negotiations that you have with the contractor, or you had, this should have been taken into consideration if the agreement was the result of a fully arm's length relationship. If the costs that are imposed by the state are so ridiculous that they create costs far beyond what a person can pay to have a franchise contractor pick up their trash, then it looks like the competition would be for them to take their own trash to the dump or the local storage facility, which is what we do. So bottom line is, the taxpayers would want the contractors treated fairly. We don't want the taxpayers being abused by a contractor, but on the other hand, we don't want the contractor being held as a hostage. And it's almost seeming like that's happening. The increased costs that the contractor suffers under the franchise contract needs to be compensated for, and it needs to be analyzed by the county to make sure that it's proper. To me, that makes sense. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. Mr. Stopper, to your question, in 2016, they had 6,541 customers. In June 18th of 2018, they have 6,564. So they have an increase of about 23. Okay, that answer your question?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And the other question being answered is?
The other question
was
is
about they do not pay.
Right, correct. That is correct. We do not pay Cal Waste for the service. Cal Waste is reimbursed by the users, and I would remind everybody here that that is an option, not that we necessarily want to see people have to self-haul to one of our 6 transfer stations and or to Rock Creek, but it is certainly an option. And that out of that entire matrix, again, funds do come back to the county in the form of the 3% franchise fee as established by the resolution that was read to you. And of course, that's in your packet today as well, if you'll notice that. And then, of course, the recyclable funds that come through 5.08 of the contract as well. So I would just let the public know that indeed, no, the county is not paying paying Cal Waste. And as a matter of fact, for the most part, they are not bringing much of the residential. Some of the material comes back to Rock Creek.
It does.
But a good majority of it does not.
You are simply, if you use their service, you are simply paying them to transfer your trash.
Correct.
To the disposal site.
Correct.
So
Absolutely.
they do not pay to deposit in our landfill.
Correct. Understood. And Jack, could you explain the little bit that does come back?
Some does come back.
So just a little bit comes back.
Yeah.
Exactly, you're 100% on the right track. The industrial waste that we pick up does come to Rock Creek, as does construction demolition debris that we pick up comes into Rock Creek.
And in the C and D, some of it, certainly if it's not painted or if it's not treated lumber, that kind of thing, we can go ahead and chip that and grind that. And you, like I say, if you were to go up to Red Hill today, or if you were to go to Wilseyville, Supervisor Garamendi, you'll see quite a bit of material that needs to be taken care of. So at this point, we're allowed to use that for alternative daily cover. But in 2020, we're not going to be able to do that anymore. So that's another issue altogether. And then we won't go into pine needles today.
Any board questions? Supervisor Oliveira?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm drawing back on negotiations on this contract back on a prior board. And I think one of the issues that was brought up and discussed was the fact that the waste was transported by the contractor to a different disposal site out of county. And the reason that was so important was the fact that we were seeing the end life of our existing cell. And we're going to have to close it and open up another one.
Correct.
We were under time restraints to do that. But I seem to recall that by going with this particular contractor and the contract negotiated, we were able to extend the time to close that cell and open up a new one due to the fact that we were underfunded. Now, a long time ago, if I'm incorrect, please someone correct me. I have to go back to the contract. That's why that contract was negotiated in that manner. That's all I have to say, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And certainly, to dovetail on that, I would state that, yes, it depends on who you speak to. I spoke with our engineer the other day, and he's given me some numbers as to what he thinks the cell life is. I'm hearing numbers from other people, so quite frankly, I'm going to take the probably the worst case scenario, in other words, the shortest term, and start focusing today on what we need to do to close that cell, and then, of course, open another one. And then, of course, that ties back into the finances. But the reality is, it could be 2 years, it could be 4 years that we still have on the cell. So starting today is not too soon. As a matter of fact, our engineer, I was speaking to him about it yesterday, and he's starting to work on that aspect right now.
I seem to recall it was at least buying us 2 years plus.
I would think so.
So I'm open for a motion on either one of the two options we have before us.
Mr. Chair, I'll throw up the first flare, see if it sticks. I'm not sure where everybody on the board is, but I would make a motion to accept the resolution letter B, which just rejects the 4.23% Cal waste rate increase and puts it on us.
Do I have a second for that?
Mr. Chair, I have clarification on that. Please, before you ask for a second, just so I understand, the 4% raise requested by the contractor is going to be honored, but it depends on who pays it. Is that what we're talking about?
He's saying that we will take it out of the recyclable fees and the franchise fees to cover the cost, which will only be enough to cover this time. Next year, any increases will have to be passed on because we've already eaten this up year after year after year as we go along. So and we may be in arrears at some point.
Right. Absolutely. My motion is to go with letter B, and this will give Brian a year to sort of give us a better accounting of where things are, what our exact needs are, and take on any additional stuff at that time. But while we get our house in order, we carry the note.
We will be carrying, unless we pass on this increase at a later date, we are covering this in perpetuity.
We take this on every year, don't we?
Yes, this is
Every year we
only
have to
for
take
this
this
current
question.
contract year. That would be correct.
For this contract.
For this contract
yes,
year,
but-
July 1 through June 30.
But for clarification though, Brian, if you absorb it under the fund now.
Yes.
And presumably next year there's another 4% increase, then you're passing on an 8% increase to unwind it.
Right. Oh, absolutely, unless the board decides otherwise.
I mean, if this keeps going up 4.5%
It's
every
it's
year, we've got a
unsustainable.
really big problem.
And I think already it's a concern. So, yes, it would be unsustainable in very short order.
So your motion then is not to pass it on in perpetuity, yours is to cover it for this year and add the increase, this increase, 4.23 or whatever it is, into next year's increase if there is one.
No, my motion is to move forward with Resolution B as written.
Okay. Is there a second on that? Do not hear a second. So it dies for lack of a second. No, it's
No.
not a procedural error. So there's no point of order. So I'm open for,
Well, I just see the trouble because we collected, $212,000 in recyclables. We're not going to get that next year from the looks of what the market's doing. So even if we absorb it right now, we're going to come back, instead of getting a check for $100 and some thousand, there's going to be a zero check, and we're going to have to raise the rates at that point. So that's my concern. I wouldn't mind doing a one-time right now of like splitting the 3% for 1 year and then see what happens next year. But, I mean, it's just we're hitting, reason I see it is just, we got a huge water rate increase that's coming up. I mean, gasoline taxes going, people's getting hit, all around by everything. And it's just, I don't know where it quits, but sooner or later, everybody runs out of money. The people quit paying their water bills or they move. I mean, we got a lot of people moving. People don't like the way it's going around here. The water rates is, they're going to come in next year and next year and next year and next year because there's no pushback. And everyone we want more money and there's no pushback on anybody. And most of the people around here, they're on fixed incomes. They're on their Social Security, retirement. So it's, I can see that this whole thing's going to just collapse. I don't know what the answer is. I truly don't, but there's just no pushback. I mean, I used to pay $38, every 3 months, every 2 months for water. Now it's 112 and it's going up. And when I first moved here, it was $8, unlimited amount of water. So, and same with the garbage. And when we came up with the garbage, that $140 you're talking about, that was to pay a bond off that redid all of Jenny Lynn Road, that put the dump in, that put the buildings, did all that. And now at $140, we can't even run the dumps on it. I mean, I just don't know where it quits. I mean, I don't have an answer. I really don't. I mean, even taking like my suggestion, just splitting the 3%, that's symbolic because that's $75,000. I mean, that doesn't, it knocks their bill down, like $1 a year or $1, and it's, I don't know. I understand what Jack's saying. I still want to agree with him, but in the long run, it's going to collapse next year anyway.
Supervisor Mills?
Yes. I'd like the public to always keep in mind, too, that parcel fees are on improved lots only. Knowing the potential in our IWM budget right now and into the future years, until we really clearly understand what those costs are going to be, I don't want to impact that at all. It's unfortunate, but there is no way to push this into the future and hope that there'll be a different resolution. All we're doing is pushing it off to another year and maybe even another 3 years and maybe even another board or whatever it might be, but I don't see that as being the best answer. If we want to be looking at a different way to fund this, maybe that's something we need to look at in a future year rather than trying to deal with it now. So I would be in favor of adopting option A at this point with an understanding that we can get some clarity from the board that if we're going to do this differently, that we look at that in an out year as to how that looks and where we're going to get the money to do it. Are you looking for a motion?
Well, yeah. So I need a motion of some type. Was that a motion to adopt Resolution A?
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution A.
Do I have a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
I have a second by Supervisor Oliveira. Any other discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Passes 4-1. We're going to take a
Thank you.
10-minute break to allow Madam Clerk her 2.5-hour break. All right, we're back in session. Before we get into the next item, can I ask the audience, people in the public, how many people plan on speaking, public comment on this item? Is there any?
More outside.
There's four.
There's more
Oh, more
outside.
outside? Can we find out how many's out there? I'm trying to get it out.
20.
Okay. Do they all plan on speaking?
Yes.
Okay, all right, I'm just trying to get an idea of how long public comment's going to be.
Till midnight.
No, because we have employees here and some of them are going to be pushing
We'll come back tomorrow morning.
12 hours.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, that's
Be
fine.
back.
That's fine. We're pushing 12 hours on some of them, so we have to be careful of labor laws and so forth. Okay, Madam Clerk, you want to read item 46?
Of course. Item 46 is from the Elections Department to certify the EIR, adopt CEQA findings of fact, and MMRP. Adopt a resolution calling a special election or calling a special advisory vote election and consolidating it with the November 6, 2018 statewide general election for the purposes of enabling the people of Calaveras County to vote to approve or reject an ordinance rescinding Chapter 17.95 and replacing it with a new Chapter 17.95, banning or regulating cannabis cultivation and related commercial activities or casting an advisory vote regarding the same.
Rebecca?
This item is significantly a duplicate of what we brought forward before in January when we were asked to bring this item forward. So what you're going to see is 4 different resolutions, one bringing both a regulatory and a ban and placing those on the ballot, one that's just bringing forth a regulatory ordinance, one that's just bringing forth a ban ordinance, and then the option to put advisory questions on the ballot. So I can answer any questions for you as far as that pertain to elections, and then the planning is here if you have any questions for what's actually in the ordinances themselves. I don't know how much of this you want me to go back over because it's the very same item we brought forward before.
We can stop there and ask if there's board questions or comments or. Supervisor Garamendi, your light's on?
Mr. Chair, I would hope that maybe we could have a robust conversation before we go to public comment. We've got a lot of people here to talk. I think we've heard from most people at least once before about cannabis. This is obviously not our first dance. And so maybe we could do that, and it might inform some of the public comments, and so we don't just go through the same public comments again. So that's what I would ask.
Well, do you want to start the conversation? So you want bringing it up?
Sure. I think we've got, you know, as Rebecca put forward, you know, we've got these options, right? We got the regulation, we got a ban, we got a, you know what? Mr. Mills did ask for this item. Perhaps he ought to lead.
Okay, we're at the board level right now. Supervisor Mills, do you have any comments?
Other than I didn't really ask for anything more than the discussion on the ban to take place. The rest of this, I think, was added on after I created the polling request. So I think it's up to the public to put their input into it, to in essence convince us as what they think is the best from their perspective of how this ought to play out.
Any other supervisor?
Mr. Mills, were you saying the public should, I didn't catch that last, public ought to talk about it first and then we'll talk about it, or the public being a vote? I'm not sure I understood.
Yeah, I said that when I polled the board initially, it was to discuss the issue of the ban on the ballot. It's the only thing I was really talking about. Anything else that was added onto that discussion was added by others. So I would want to hear from others as to what they think is their thoughts on it.
Well, I voted against having this discussion, so I guess the others are not me.
Well, I think we had a discussion about him wanting to pull the board on bringing back the advisory part to the ballot, and then we had a discussion about bringing the whole thing back, and I think you were in favor of doing that. You weren't in favor of just bringing back the advisory one. I think you said that, at the time that it was a political thing and it was too little too late, Supervisor Mills, and then we went on to a discussion and asked to bring back the entire thing on, we had entertained on February 13th. And I think we were all in a 4-0 vote for that. And so I think that's where we're at. Supervisor Clapp, your light's on?
Yeah, I would, we've already had the vote to the people on Measure D that, on, you know, legalized marijuana and stuff for commercial grows, and that was turned down. Measure B was rejected by the courts, and I would like to see the ban come forward, and ban only in very clear language that people knows what they're voting on, and let the people decide if what we did is right, and if they do, then they can make it an initiative by the people that was presented to them by the board, and that will end the discussion.
Supervisor Oliveira?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we should address these one issue at a time, probably in the order, in a progressive manner. And I have a question regarding the advisory status. It's my opinion and position that I'm against an advisory status, and I would like to see an issue placed on the ballot to be discussed at this meeting to make it somewhat binding by the vote of the people.
Supervisor Garamendi.
Thank you. I think we should, this is obviously a very emotionally charged issue. I mean, we have been working on this for 18 months, almost nonstop. I don't think there's a whole lot of new information about cannabis for us to learn, but I think that we as a board need to be paused for a second and be very cautious. What we're doing is two things. But first thing what we're doing is we are putting our county at risk for additional litigation. If we go forward with the ban, or we go forward with the regulation, EIR clock, we're challenging this, begins all over again. So any costs that we've already incurred, we'll incur again. It also stands that, you know, we could always lose. or we could win, I don't know. But we need to take and keep in mind that this is not without cost nor consequence for us to do this. I think that we need to take that into account. I'm also, concerned about why we're doing this now, and the method that we're doing this. And as Supervisor Mills put out, when he floated the idea of putting the ban forward to a vote, he cited not being divisive. And I think that, it is going to be very divisive for our community to go through this again. We spent 18 months where this county really, we didn't get half the work done that we should have been able to get done in the last year because of this subject. And we're going to look at the next 6 months of the continuing fight on this. And I don't think we're doing our citizens a service by being distracted by this, opening ourselves up to further risk and litigation. The ban is the law of the land. That battle was fought and won. So I'm questioning why we're doing this. And I hope that in our further debate before we vote, we get a really clear understanding of why we're doing this. What is our goal? And with that, continue discussion, I guess, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Mills, your light's on?
Yeah, I think that the initial polling that I had requested was to discuss the idea of an advisory vote, and it's probably the reason why it's here. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is the answer. I would like to hear from those who don't think it's a good answer as to what their reasoning is as to why an advisory vote is not the best choice for those supervisors that are considering it as an up or down vote.
Supervisor Oliveira?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been fighting this battle for a long, long time. The positions on both sides of that fence have been so convoluted that nobody knows what the hell to believe. I think it's time that the people of this county stepped up and say yes or no, and put an end to the divisiveness that's going on in this county. And I believe advisory would just prolong the agony. Let's give an opportunity for the people to speak by their vote.
And Mr. Chair, my counter to that is that an advisory vote is an advisory vote. So if the citizens of Calaveras decide that they want to have a regulated cannabis industry, that would be advisory to this board. And I think that if we've done one thing over the last 18 months, we've proven that we are not capable of creating regulation. Therefore, the people will lose. If the advisory vote comes back for a ban, well, we're already there. So in many ways, it's heads, regulation loses, tails, regulation loses. And the ban wins on both sides. So I think that it's a hollow gesture to do a advisory vote, and I think it's misguided to do a binding vote. It's not in our best interest as a county.
Supervisor Clapp?
I'm totally against an advisory. I mean, that's just wasting everybody's time. Because if they come up and say, oh, we want regulations, I'm pretty sure this board wouldn't go along with that. I mean, because I think Jack would probably agree with that. And I think, if we're going to ask the people, I want to know what they want.
Point of order.
There's no point, there's no procedural error here. I'm going to speak a little bit here about what is probably an elephant in the room. And that is, yes, this board did vote for a ban, and it was a 3-2 vote. It wasn't unified. But because the board voted for this ordinance, it will continue to be an ongoing fight, possibly, every time a new board turns over, because then the board can bring it back and relook at it and either go for regulation, and if the next election, everybody gets on board, we don't want that, and they put in people that want to put in a van, and it's going to come back, and it's just going to keep going back and forth. The only way that this is going to be resolved is by a vote of the people that what they want. Do they want a ban or do they want regulations? And then the board is out of it. The board cannot have any say in it. They'll have to go along with what the public wants. And the only way it can be changed, would be through the people and through a vote and having it brought back by the people to the ballot. And that's about the only way, in my opinion, even going down the line, even going into next year, depending what the election does in November, and then the following 2 years, and then the following 2 years, it could be continually festering here in this county on both sides of it, because it is very passionate from both sides. That's obvious since I've been on this board, and we've sat here for 18 months. We've gone through many comments from both sides of it. And the only way to put an end to it, in my opinion, is give it to the people and let the people tell us what they want in order for it to be out of our hands and not being continually brought back and forth and back and forth. Now that's my opinion. I'm open to public comment on that. I'm open to hear what has to be said about that. I was part of some of the negotiations to try and put some regulations on it at one time. But I would like to hear from the people here in this room, and I've heard from a lot of people already that aren't here today, versus emails and phone calls. So that's where I am at this point.
Mr. Chair, I agree with you, and I tell you, when I'm reading through the regulations late at night, I want nothing more than for this all to be resolved. I truly do, one way or the other. But at the same time, I think back and I think about Measure D or the urgency ordinance and all the things that we learned when we went through there. And I keep thinking to myself, we learned a lot and we had to adjust. This is still really new industry to California, and it hasn't all been worked out. And I worry that we'd make a mistake and we couldn't fix it. We know that, certainly putting it in residential areas was a bad idea. And if this was baked into a vote, then we couldn't go back and fix it. It would just be the way it is. So that's my only concern, because God knows, emotionally, I'd love to wrap this thing up too. But I also think that, our job is to adjust and get this going now. And that stands for a ban as well. I mean, we could have things change. We don't know. The board, the federal government, heck, a meteor might hit us. We don't know what the future is going to bring. So I think that, as a representative democracy, we are voted in to represent, put forward our best ideas. And if we're wrong, trust me, I'm sure they'll vote us out. So my only concern is if I thought I knew exactly how it's going to go, it'd be great. But I'm willing to bet we'd make a mistake and we wouldn't be able to fix it. Or there'd be an opportunity we couldn't take advantage of. Would be my only concern. But I certainly, emotionally, I'm right there with you. But.
Supervisor Clapp, your light's on. You have any other comments? Supervisor Mills?
Supervisor Garamendi, I couldn't agree more with the concept that we have spent 18 months dealing with this issue. And as Supervisor Tofinelli said, it's not going to go away anytime soon. This will be a revolving door. And you're exactly right that a vote of the people is going to seal the fate of whatever is going to happen here. But it will take it out of this body's hands and allow somebody else to, in essence, help us to understand what they want. We are here to represent them as a whole. And that has to be always forefront in our mind. as to who do we really represent? Do we represent our districts? Do we represent the county? I think we represent both. But that has to be in the forefront as we make this kind of discussion. And what does the public want? I too have had lots of emails on this issue, and there's a lot of passion and there's a lot of polarity. But we have to sort through that. And I can tell you as elected officials, I'm sure we do a lot of homework. We all do. And it's just part of what we have to do. Is the electorate going to do the same level of homework, or are they going to be left to sound bites and driven by sound bites? So we have to be thinking about all of these pieces as we listen to what public comment might be.
Supervisor Garamendi?
You know, one of the things, I don't know what I did with it. I think I brought it in there. You know, I will admit that I haven't thought this one all the way through, but we are listening today to a nationally known and well-respected pollster who sat there and did a survey of what people thought about the transit occupancy tax. If we're really interested, thank you. And, if we're really interested in getting a quick read on people, why don't we do a comprehensive poll rather than waste the money on an election? Everybody's efforts, everybody's things, and let's get up. We all agree that these guys are good enough for our tax initiative. I bet they'd be willing to do a comprehensive thing, and hey, we'll find out what everybody thinks, and we don't have to have everybody here spend the entire fall working on campaigns, spending our capital as a county, spending everybody's capital out of their pocket. Let's do it. Let's pay for it. I bet it'd probably cost us $25,000. And hey, maybe we'll find out something about what the people are thinking. Because yeah, we could spin numbers any way we want, and but it's an awful big piece of jeopardy to lay it all on an election line.
Any more conversation? Supervisor Oliveira? No?
I'm going to reserve my comments until I hear from the public.
Okay. All right, I'm going to open up the public at this time, but I'm going to say that we are only going to go for about an hour and get through as many as we can, and then we will, if we're not through all the public comments at that time, we'll reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. We're getting late into the night, and some people have been here for a long time, so.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I hope that in the hours up, we could reconsider that.
Let's take a poll.
I've got a full day booked tomorrow, starting at 6, and we're already at 5 o'clock. It's not a good time to call and cancel all your meetings.
Supervisor Mills.
I prefer to keep working.
Excuse me, Supervisor Clapp.
So what are we pulling the board on?
We're going to pull the board on what time we are going to recess tonight.
I already canceled my appointments for yesterday, so.
You what?
I canceled my appointments I had for tomorrow, so.
Okay, so you, an hour from now at 6:15?
Yeah, 6:15, we're done.
Supervisor Mills?
It's fine.
Supervisor Oliveira?
I want to go.
You want to go?
You want to keep working?
I want to keep working
You want to keep working until what time?
until we get a reasonable time so our staff doesn't fall asleep on us.
Maybe we could get backup for clerk. I don't know. But I just soon work till the job's done tonight.
Okay, well, we'll go on.
That's bullshit.
Pardon?
You heard me.
What did you say exactly?
I said that's bullshit to make these people work past that time.
Okay, stop. We're going to open up the public comment. Al, you're first.
Okay.
You gonna let that go?
I'm Al Segala, speaking as a real estate broker and not representing the Taxpayer Association, who is neutral on this. Do you know that somebody bit this microphone? There's teeth marks in it. Now, did the chair cause that?
Did I bite that? No.
No. Did you intimidate the speaker? So the speaker bit it.
No.
Okay. Well, I think Jack had a really good idea that, but don't do a phony poll. This poll that was done on increasing the TOT tax was not an honest poll. It wasn't. The poll was designed to promote the TOT tax. So if you do a phony poll, you don't want to do that. You need to be an unbiased poll, and that would work. That'd give you the response from the public, and your questions could be more detailed. One of the questions could be, should the county be involved in cannabis regulation at all? Who ever heard of that? That doesn't mean you wouldn't have land use controls and other things, but if you went to a vote of the people for either a ban or a regulation, and it turned out to be a mistake, it's so difficult to go back to the public again to try to get it corrected. And so advisory would be better in that sense. So number one, do nothing. Number two, do an advisory poll that's an unbiased poll. And that would be, seems to make sense. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do my disclaimer. These are my thoughts and my opinions only, and they reflect on no one else, especially my husband, because heaven knows we disagree on this. The idea of putting anything on the ballot at this point in time is ludicrous. You have not even had the ban basically in effect for a month. You have no idea what bugs you may find in that, how you may want to adjust it, and you're asking the people of this county to basically buy a software program without any beta testing. And we all know how that works with software. Well, it's going to work the same way with this. Look how many things came up on the urgency ordinance as it played out. I think the very least you should do is put the ban in effect the way you have it now for the period you had the urgency ordinance. Give it a fair shot. And then go to the voters and say, okay, we know this didn't work and we know this worked. But give them the best product possible. Don't take the easy way out just because it is so polarizing this county. Because putting this on the ballot right now would be the easy way out. And that's all I have to say.
California has not yet set the policies and regulations that everyone needs to have in order to make a good decision. I think we need to wait until there are regulations set forth by the state, policies are set, and then the community can make a choice. Every day things are changing. Today's newspaper says the U.S. okays marijuana-based drug for seizures. They're starting to do testing. They're starting to do ways of processing marijuana in order to determine what the benefits might be. We're kind of flailing around in the dark, deciding what we like, what we don't like, when there are so much possibilities for success and for failure. The unregulated grows, the illegal grows. Instead of destroying the crops, I would suggest that we contract with a lab or a facility that would come in and harvest or process so that we could see what the benefits would be medically, for pain, for all of the issues, the medicine that it promises. we have been arguing for a long time about this, and it is truly polarizing. And I think if we had all the information that we needed from the authorities, from the professionals that are studying it, that are testing it, we'd have a whole better idea of how we could utilize it for the benefit of the people and for the benefit of Calaveras. What the money means, I've heard it called dirty money. All money's dirty. It's got every bacteria in the world on it. But what we want to talk about is the benefits that the money would bring to our community, the benefits the testing would do for society, and maybe we could come to a cohesive answer that we could all be happy with, that people aren't pointing their fingers at each other and calling each other names and accusing people of this, that, and the other thing. I say wait.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, David Sweet from District 3, not a grower. I think the most important thing for this board to consider is what is your responsibility in this? If you're even discussing the idea of having a voter advisory or something that's even more binding, it seems to me that you have some kind of obligation to educate the public in a meaningful and honest way about this issue. That has not occurred. The only thing at this point from this board is a document from Mr. Mills, which has been called a flat-out deception and an act of science fiction. This board has done nothing to condemn the introduction of that intentionally deceptive document into your proceedings. Not even a comment, okay? This county and you gentlemen have the obligation, or have the right rather, to make a decision that's in the best interest of everybody in this county. How can it be done when the only information that's being provided to the public is a flat-out lie, proven by 3 scientists who've written extensively, taking apart the 61-page document, that it is intentionally deceptive? Do you have no obligation? The local paper refuses to print anything about this. They feel their obligation is to basically pander to the banners over here. Okay? I actually think it's the right of this county, if they want to have a ban, if these people speak for the majority of the people in this county, that's what has to happen. But they're lying. Mr. Mills is lying. He got a document that if it was introduced into court would have been called suborning perjury. It's an absolute outrage. So the question I want to leave you with is, what are you going to do about it to educate the public? Thank you.
Hi, I'm going to read this. I'm really nervous. So, my name is Peggy Chambers. I've lived in West Point for 40 years, and I've raised 2 daughters there and own my own business. I'm the president of the board for the Blue Mountain Coalition for Youth and Families for the past 20 years. I don't grow, and I don't use it. Since the supervisors allowed cannabis to become a viable business in Calaveras County, for the first time in 40 years, I've seen young people moving into our community. They volunteer at the center, participate in the garden, enjoy many of the services we provide, and have donated a lot of money, thousands and thousands of dollars. Have you been to West Point lately? We have a bunch of old people, including myself, and we're going nowhere really fast. You need to come and see West Point. We need businesses in the county, and especially in West Point, that would provide a living wage and bring young people and children to our town. When was the last time any of the 4 of you, I know Jack knows this, was threatened with closing your elementary schools? I would like to propose an idea. I know I don't want to throw some of the growers under the bus, but why not designate District 2 as a cannabis district? Most of us, the cannabis grows, are in District 2. Its boundaries are set. We could take 70% of the income from taxes to implement the regulations and deal with all the awful stuff you guys say we will have, and hopefully get rid of the illegal grows. 30%, which is millions of dollars, would go to the county. Maybe have a cannabis department at the county that just dealt with that.
We can elect 5-person board for oversight from Moke Hill, Mountain Ranch, Railroad Flat, Glencoe, West Point. As an oversight similar to our fire boards, we might be able to set up a database for 1031 exchanges for people that have permits outside of District 2 or a movable permit to District 2. Then you guys can sit back and say, not in my backyard. Mr. Tofinelli, I find it interesting that throughout these proceedings, you talked a lot about your business having to follow the rules, and you had all these rules that you had to do. But I wonder when the last time you built something, you got a permit, you finished it, and a new inspector came into town and told you to tear it down because he didn't like it. He just didn't like it. That is exactly what you did to all of the cannabis growers. By sending this to a vote, you are slithering out from under your decisions. Have a backbone and just say how much you've messed up this county, what cruel consequences you impose on good people that just wanted to make a living. You own this mess. I don't understand why you can't just fix it by lifting the ban, or at least lift the ban in District 2. Sending it to the voters now is just a waste of time and money we do not have. Thanks.
Hello, Justin Catalano, District 2. Cannabis provides all of mankind's basic essential needs: food, fuel, clothing, housing material, and then medicine. Nobody in the course of history has ever died from an overdose of cannabis, overdose of consumption of cannabis. In March of 2016, I was trying to open a business, and at my public hearing at the Planning Commission, I offered anybody $1 million to anybody that could provide proof that somebody has died from an overdose. No one has come to collect their money still, even though people claim that it's so bad. It's never killed not one person. 88,000 people die a year from alcohol. 480,000 people die from tobacco use. That's from the Center of Disease Control. At this point, I'm just going to say that we had about 500 farms. They paid about $13 million in taxes to the general fund. Basically, 1% of the population paid $13 million to provide services and funding for everybody in this county. We only have 0.6 of a person per acre, and this statistic is from the COG website on their overall work program. Little history. In 1996, California passed legislation allowing medical cannabis. In 2009, Calaveras passed a dispensary ordinance. Today is 2018. There's only 3 dispensaries that are operating in this county. Rules and regulations help keep these kind of things under control. 2011, there was 11 states in the United States that had medical cannabis laws. 2013, Uruguay passed legalization for everybody of cannabis. In 2017, California legalizes the adult use of cannabis. In 2018, we have 31 states in the United States. More than half of the country has rules and regulations governing medical cannabis. Obviously, things are moving forward. In 1919, a medical catalog had 3 different pharmaceutical companies in there: Eli Lilly, Park Davis, and Bristol Myers Squibb. Each of them all made cannabis medicine.
Thank you, Board. Bill McManus. First of all, I'd like to start off by saying I resent being called a liar. Right on cue. You know, everyone's got to have a straight man. What I'd like to go back and address is this long battle that we've all talked about. How many times have we tried to regulate marijuana? Lots of times. There's been 2 urgency ordinances, all sorts of attempts, many failures. It doesn't work. You can't regulate a business like this. This county is not ready for prime time. Supervisor Garamendi made the comment that we've learned nothing. No, you have. You've learned a lot. You've learned that you cannot regulate this industry. It needs to be banned. And you talk about advisories and polls and finding out what the people want. You've already done that. Measure D failed. It was a regulatory ordinance. Prop 64 failed in Calaveras County. The EIR, which got all sorts of public input, suggested the ban is the best alternative. We've heard all the fairy tales and myths about medicine and the money coming in and everything else, and yet we still can't prove how much it really costs to have marijuana in this county. We don't know what the total costs are. We know what some of the revenue streams are, but what are the total costs? You can't make a decision based on one side of the ledger. Every attempt that we've made to try to find out how much it really costs to entertain this experiment in this county has been met with silence. We can't get the information. I don't know if you can get it or not. I hope you can. And I hope if you do have that information, you'll see that we need to get this thing over with once and for all. I've heard the comment that, every time the board changes, this is going to go back and forth. That's absolutely right. This issue has torn this county apart. Many difficult, important things that need to be taken care of have had to wait while we toy around with marijuana again, over and over and over. The people have spoken several times. You've taken the poll. The results have been revealed to you many times. Now it's time to understand what the people want and make it a permanent ordinance so that this doesn't become a juggling contest between boards that are in the middle of their term, moving to their next term, in the middle of their next term, being recalled, dying, whatever happens where the board changes. This has to continue on with permanence. The people can make it permanent. If something goes wrong, we need to fix it. The people are willing to fix it. But let them vote on this, a ban, yes or no. Let's get it over with and move on with county business. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Good afternoon. My name is
can you
Terry
hold on for just a
McBride.
second, please? We need to show some civility in this room. I understand the fact that you may not like what somebody is saying, but they have their 3 minutes. And they're gonna be able to speak their mind and not have to put up with these slight comments from either side of the room.
It's the First Amendment.
Just, if you don't want to hear what they have to say, then that's fine. But right now, we need to show some civility, and I understand we have the problem earlier, I understand, okay? And if it happens again, I'll deal with it, but he is an elected official, and you people out there have the choice on where you want to vote when it comes to the election with him. So, but I'm not going to sit here and list snide remarks. There's no need to. Every one of us are American in here. We have the right to speak, the freedom to speak. And you need to respect that, okay? And the clapping, we already know. There'll be no clapping. If you want to clap, you can go outside. You can, I don't care if you want to wave your hands or whatever, but we need to keep and show civility in this room for the sanctity of this board. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Terry McBride. I'm a lifelong resident of Calaveras County, 5th generation. Got deep roots. I live in Mountain Ranch. I'm a Butte Fire survivor. I'm still there. And I'm going to kind of go off my thing. The gentleman who spoke before mentioned costs. Well, I'm going to tell you the cost to Mountain Ranch. One of the businesses that's been there for over 14 years is leaving. Another one is likely going to close. And Cinders, I went into the hardware department the other day, and I was the only one there. So I'm watching my little town dissolve because of a choice that you all made. I don't agree with it. Now understand that being part of the Butte Fire, I'm right in the Grove Center. And I was right in the middle, completely and utterly surrounded by illegal grows. You would completely expect me to support your ban. I completely disagree with it. I support regulation. I frankly support cannabis. And I educated myself, is what I did. I did a lot of educating of myself, of the value of what cannabis can do for the human population, pets too. It can do a lot. But I also educated myself on what it can do for our county in the way of industry. We don't have one. Tourism is wonderful, but when the economy starts to tank, we ain't going to have tourists. Cannabis, people are going to need because there's always going to be health issues. So I would like you to consider, this is the grown-up option. Sit down with these folks and work out something reasonable. It's what grown-ups do, is they sit down with those that they don't agree with and they come to a term. I think you're going to split this county deeper and divide it with this little vote thing because the lies are going to fly. And I've already seen it, and it's so sad. I guarantee you, other than Jack, my blood runs deepest here. And I have seen this county be ripped up, and it breaks my heart. One, I would ask you folks to educate yourself on the value of cannabis. Educate, even if you disagree, educate yourselves. And I would ask you to be grown-ups and sit down with these folks and talk, for God's sakes. Otherwise, kiss Mount Ranch goodbye, because the economy is tanking up there. I see it. The gas station is going to be gone. Anyway, thank you.
I think what the biggest problems we have today is what's so confusing about what we're being asked or what you're being asked. We have a ban. That was voted on. It's in effect. Seems like the discussion isn't getting rid of the ban. That wasn't part of what's on discussion today. The discussion is whether we put it on the ballot or not. I don't understand. The opposite side has said all along that the vote isn't in this county for a ban, but yet they don't want to put it on the ballot. It was taken off twice. It was taken away from us putting it on the ballot. I don't know what they're afraid of. They said today, they did the math, and they said there's no vote. It can never be passed. So what's the fear? We're not talking about regulation. Again, the thing is, I think we should only put the ban on the ballot because I don't know what regulation you're talking about. That just popped out of the air from nowhere, that we're going to also put regulation. What regulation? Is it Toffanelli's regulation? Is it some other regulation? We don't know what it is. We know what the ban is because it's in place. We're not wanting to put on the ballot a new ban, a new different kind of ban. We just want to confirm whether or not the people want to keep that ban that's in place. The other thing is, and I also agree, the ban hasn't been given much chance to see if it's going to work. I don't see a whole lot being done to eradicate the grows since the ban. I mean, we've had a few things, but I'm seeing truck after truck coming down the hill again, loaded up with product. And this is under a ban. Illegal or legal, it doesn't matter. Something should be being done about it. We're under a ban. So we know all of it's illegal. Why aren't the trucks being stopped? Why are we allowing it? See, we're just letting it go on, and nothing's being done. And I don't think we need an advisory vote on a ballot. We need to just put it out there. The public votes. If the ban doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. Then it comes back to you, and you decide which one of the regulations you want to look at if you want to get rid of the ban. But give the public the chance that we gathered signatures, had enough signatures to get on the ballot, but you get some slick, expensive lawyers come in and find a technicality, take it away from us. Why did they do that? Because they knew it was going to pass. Why are they arguing today? Why are they so heated on this discussion? Because they know that a ban is going to pass. Otherwise, they wouldn't care. They'd be also yell, put it on. Let's get it voted down once and for all. So I'm challenging, let's stick to one issue, not these four things. When I watched when you took a poll of the board, my understanding is we can come back and look at having the public decide whether they want to ban or not. Now all of a sudden we got four things again. We're taking a giant step backwards. We're not moving forward. So either we just keep the ban, make it work, enforce it, put it on the ballot, or do nothing and just let it keep going.
Benjamin Stopper, District 5. From what I recall from the last meeting when you guys pulled the board, that the final poll was on to bring back what was presented in the February agenda before the Board of Supervisors. That included regulation, and that's what was discussed here. Now, I'm torn on this issue. I mean, there's so many different ways we can go. I think that people should have two choices if they're going to really have a choice. If you guys are going to put it on a ballot, I think there should be two choices. But also, I think Vicki Mills is right. If you put anything up on the ballot right now, laws could change in the future and we can conflict with them. You know how long we'll have to wait before we can get it on the ballot to make it right again? I mean, it takes forever. You guys discussed this in February. You discussed this from what I recall July or August of last year. This was brought up by Mr. Oliveira twice. That back then, there was at least 3 guys on this board that I can say that were dead against it. I think there were 4 guys that were against it. Why are we talking about it now? Why? I think Jack has it right. Because the political tides have turned. People are nervous. I understand that. You're going to draw more people to the polls. That's actually a good thing. I like that idea. But, you know, this issue is divisive. It split families. It split friends. It split our community as a whole when it comes to Calaveras County. The last board before you guys, I don't think they got it right. You guys, I don't think you got it right. Possibly in the future when I'm in January, if I'm possibly here, I might not get it right. The world is fluid. Fluidity shows today, with this being before us, contradicting what a majority of this board said back in February. Do I think the people should have the choice? Absolutely. That's democracy. Should we put ourselves in a position so that we're in trouble in the future? Probably not. We should keep ourselves fluid along with the world. Things change.
Gentlemen. My name is Rick Beard, District 2, out of Murphy's. Thanks for hearing me. Try as you might, but this election will never be about cannabis. This election is fundamentally a referendum on this board's failure of leadership, abdicating your role in our representative democracy after wasting everyone's time for the last 2 years and forcing the voters to decide between 2 options that you yourselves have crafted, yet you refuse to stand behind, is a farce. This election will be a referendum on the incompetence and fiscal mismanagement of this board, and today's discussion is only further proof of the wasteful incompetence of this board. This election will be a referendum on the corruption and misuse of public resources by this board for your own personal interest and the benefit of the special interest you represent. Bill McManus, having done a complete 180 on the issue, now wants to see this on the ballot, and the board appears eager to appease him and his bully tactics. The available record clearly reveals the coordination between Bill McManus and 3 supervisors who are working in his corner. This board has chosen to pursue the interests of Bill McManus and the at most 30% of the electorate that the ban committee represents. And now the rest of us, 70% of the population, are left with a structural deficit that has doubled in the last year, and the political stunts like this instead of a functioning government. And if anybody wonders why all the trucks are still rolling and why nothing's being done about it, is because there's no money to do anything about it, because no taxes are being collected from the cannabis that has been grown. Can you address the board, please? I'm sorry. Without this taxation, I feel that the county's not going to be able to manage the activity that will illegally continue here. And I don't want to see that, because it scares the hell out of me, because I live on a street that's affected by it. I mean, we've got this old car that's been sitting out on Sheep Ranch for, I don't know, so many months that people are writing poems on it. We get a tow truck or something out there maybe to tow that thing away, or is that, you know, nobody belongs to AAA, or got $30? Thanks. Can you get that car out of there maybe?
How's it going? I'm Ben Gilbert from Section 2. We as the voters are being presented with false choice. You want to force the voters to choose between two ordinances you won't even stand behind yourselves. Who actually understands what is being considered? Who on this board can tell us what is being considered? All of the permutations, implications, and consequences of particular courses of action are being discussed and decided at this meeting. How many voters actually understand what is being considered, why it is being considered now? 3, there are serious implications regarding ethical and legal efficiency of sitting supervisors making a decision that will have direct material effect on the campaigns in the coming November election, particularly given the available record and the clear committee and supervisors facing recall and or re-election challenges in November. We have never been presented the facts. Supervisor Mills, Supervisor Clapp, and Supervisor Toffanelli have all lied or obfuscated regarding Measure C funds. We've never seen the fee nexus study conducted on the UO. The only scientists that have studied the issue have been brought here by farmers. A, assent paid for the UO fees, peer review challenging silent position ignored. B, UOP economic impact and fiscal impact studies completely ignored by this board. C, Nathan Bello, conservation biologist review of silent position completely ignored. D, Dr. Patrick Sullivan review of the EIR, the silent position disregarded. One thing I want to say about the environmental issue that you guys have brought into Calaveras County, or saying what the growers have brought. By passing the permit and allowing people to clear their property and create flat spots and all this erosion control that you wanted, now these growers aren't able to grow there, so now this space that has been cleared out is there for nothing.
Jason Campbell, District 5. Clyde Clapp, lawsuits and staff time. On January 10th, 2018, Clyde Clapp stated, "Well, I thought we were bringing it back and let the people do it. I thought that was a good deal. I mean, I just don't want to have to defend it or something. I think a people initiative is we don't have to defend it. If they go to court with it, I think it's going to end up there." Clyde Clapp, in an email sent on Wednesday, January 17th, 2018. "I completely agree. I feel if this were to come to the ballot, then it needs to be initiated by the public. I will not be making any other vote to bring this issue back up and waste more staff time. Jack and Mike lost this one, and now they are looking for another route to get pot growers legal again." On February 13th, 2018, refused to make a motion and let the same agenda item die for lack of action taken by this board. Clyde, you've made two arguments for why you don't support this agenda item. 1, you don't want to have to defend the county in the case of lawsuits. As you know, the county is likely to be sued by either side if you move forward with an initiative. Bill McManus, in an email written on Monday, January 22nd, 2018, on another subject regarding citizens' initiatives to allow, regulate, tolerate, or turn a blind eye to local ordinance that defy federal law, I have researched the problem and have found the path. First, the Elections Department has no authority to blunt citizens' initiatives that would violate federal laws regarding marijuana. Even if citizens pursued ordinances that would reinstitute slavery or deny women the right to vote, the Elections Department is tasked and limited to the documents conforming to the election law. The only remedies are the county suing itself, or the issue is adjudicated before a superior court judge to have the matter barred from the ballot or invalidated prior to implementation of the ordinance. Measure D could have been challenged in court or to the Board of Supervisors for the censure due to its conflict with federal law. These are not options our conflicted county council will volunteer to the board. It is up to us as citizens to do the job we pay for in the county council's office. Sad but true, getting this issue before a federal attorney early could help all law-abiding citizens defeat the well-funded pot cartels from inflicting their will on an already brutalized citizenry. I'm not going to finish because I only have 15 seconds. Gentlemen, I think the county it's completely, you guys, a few of you should be disgusted with yourselves. You're sitting there and have admitted today in this that you will not listen to an advisory vote, so you need a binding vote.
Thank you.
Tim McDonald, District 1. Flip-flop. By placing the ban ordinance on the ballot, this board is conceding that it doesn't know what the voters want and that you don't represent the people. This meeting is an admission that you've been wasting everyone's time for the last 2 years while you failed to make a decision with regard to cannabis or do anything else. Adopting any of these proposed resolutions is essentially a vote of no confidence in yourselves and your work these last 2 years. And rightfully so. All we have to show for your accomplishments is a $9 million deficit. Clyde Clapp, if you backtrack on your vote for the ban and make the voters decide where you apparently can't, you will have literally 0 accomplishments to run on for your re-election in November. The ban is the promise you made to the voters and that you kept with the voters. That's your campaign. Now, if you vote to put the ban up for a referendum, you will have broken your promise to enact a ban and instead abdicated your responsibility to make the decision that you will have to hold the voters. You have told the voters to make the decisions you can't be relied upon to make. And you will have to explain why you didn't adopt the ban in 2017, and then when you did in 2018, only to backtrack and ask the voters to take over. They will undoubtedly wonder why they voted for you in the first place, if you're not going to stand by your decisions. And Gary, you'll have to go before the voters and try to convince them you're a leader after you just wasted everyone's time the last 2 years waffling back and forth. As Bill McManus said back on July 27th, 2017, Gary Tofinelli can change his mind between clicks of a clock. Let's see, quote, I will see if you stand by the decision you made in January or if you flip-flopinelli. That's his quote, by the way. This vote will show what kind of a leader you are. Are you going to backtrack on your vote? Are you going to cave into pressure from Bill McManus and Dennis Mills and pursue their political agenda at the people's expense? Are you going to place regulations on the ballot that you yourself said you couldn't accept in your answer to the recall because they were a threat to the security and health of the community?
Hello, my name is Marion, District 2. I'm going to be very quick, but I'm not going to read anything like I was going to. In this current political climate, I think one thing 3 of you, 4 of you, definitely not 1 of you, are underestimating is that we have all become experts at being lied to at this point. We know when we're being lied to. We are being lied to all the time. We have all become political experts. And this is a complete lie to the people, to us. This is not what you guys are supposed to be doing. We are human beings that are trying to live a life. And you guys are playing political games with our lives. It is disgusting. It is morally reprehensible of what you've done, and you know it. You literally know it, and you don't care. This is our lives. This deserves some respect. I have been up in front of this board, and I've seen, as a woman, I have felt majorly disrespected by many, definitely 2 members of this board. I really wish that you guys would sit and think about who we are. We are people. We are not your enemy. And the fact that you're being divisive and tearing us all apart is, I cannot say, other than the President of the United States, I just honestly cannot be more, absolutely horrified at the situation. I really hope that you guys take it in your hearts and minds to realize you represent me, even if you don't like me. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Peter, District 2, American, Californian. Thank you again for your time, folks. As a former farmer, I know what 70-plus hours a week is, getting off work, having to go home to your families, and then help your elderly neighbors and things as well. But I'd like to talk about the ban failing with the ordinance there. The ban proponents twice attempted and failed to qualify an initiative on the ballot. The last attempt for the Calaveras County Superior Court ruled the language of the Measure B fails to substantially comply with the mandated language of Election Code Section 9124 for an ordinance submitted to the voters of the county. Moreover, the court finds this is more than a technical semantic shortcoming, as the actual language of Measure B is misleading. Again, the ban proponents also submitted a ballot arguing in the favor of adopting Measure B, which contained at least 8 false and misleading statements that were either amended or changed to reflect the truth that was completely misleading. Bill McManus is still, a year later, pushing the same lies about the county accessing billions of dollars in federal funding. To be clear, it is stated position that the Superior Court of Calaveras County that Bill McManus and Dave Tuno, the proponents of Measure B, made false and misleading statements, misleading the voters. And I feel that doesn't get talked about at all. If I were to come up and lie to the public, I would be brought out on that. I would like people to be held to the same standards as citizens. If you're going to be an elected official and represent the county, everyone, and us being talked about in the state, let's be adults, let's work together, and let's talk about things, not just do backdoor handshakes and worry about your personal businesses. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kevin. I'm a voter in Calaveras County. I wanted to read some official minutes from the February 13th meeting. Supervisor Tofinelli polled the board regarding their interest in placing anything on the June ballot. Supervisor Clapp, Mills, Garamendi, and Tofinelli stated no. Supervisor Oliveira stated yes. No items will be placed on the June ballot. You can see Supervisor Tofinelli, Clapp, and Mills all stuck to the party line and opposed this idea in February. Supervisor Mills, to this day, has remained silent in the face of Bill McManus's February 8th email. The only supervisors who have remained consistent are Supervisors Oliveira and Garamendi. I think the public deserves a full disclosure and accounting of the communications and meetings of Supervisor Mills, Supervisor Clapp, Supervisors Tofinelli, and Bill McManus, so that the public is fully informed regarding the interests influencing this decision. I'd also like to say, as a farmer, with Proposition 64, I personally voted no. And I don't think that reflects how this county was personally feeling, because a lot of farmers did vote no in fear of seeing for-profit corporations take over. Putting a ban and regulatory vote to the people is a lose-lose situation for us, kind of like the last presidential debate. And that's why I wrote in Bernie Sanders. Thank you.
Hello. Jessica Clofine, District 1. First of all, I'd like to say thank you, Jack Yermany, for taking such a cautious and thoughtful approach to this. It's been very divisive in the county. It's divided us in the county, and I do think that it takes lots of discussion and time and attention to figure out the right path here. I agree that a binding vote to the people right now could possibly create loopholes that will definitely be utilized by those that we do not want. We've seen people who don't like to follow the law come in and try to fill in loopholes. So going at this in a very cautious way, I think, is very important. I also want to say that some of the options of bringing these things back and not providing the people with educated information and various options, it feels divisive. It feels personally, politically motivated.
And I'm seeing an attempt to make fellow board members and voting members, voting citizens, become pawns. Pawns towards the sole agenda of the band group, which is really turning out to be the true minority specialist group that I don't think we should overwhelmingly cater towards. We've talked a lot and heard a lot today about what the voters feel and how we voted largely for more new income streams, as well as candidates that openly support reasonable regulation. The need for regulations that are workable, which both sides agree with. Just an example, removing it out of rural residential, getting it out of our backyards. These are things that both sides can agree on, and reasonable regulations can help protect us. These are the options that are going to keep us safe, that are going to keep our county thriving, and are going to help create a successful future for us. A ban may be an easy option for some because then we may not have to talk about it for a little while. But I say we talk about it more. Create people to dedicate time and focus to figure out what is best. And with all the other industries, regulation is how you control the bad. Regulation is how you control is how you keep people safe. Is how you create the guidelines to allow people to grow and people to be happy with their neighbor. And I strongly suggest you guys consider a tax refund from the cannabis to the people of Calaveras. This would help personal families and could help others. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board. Carlos Pollo, District 1. Just want to refer to a couple comments that were made here today about the trucks coming down the road. I don't know for a fact, but I know a lot of the people that I know that were registered growers have completely ceased their operations. So the people you're seeing are probably the ones that weren't registered and are going to be unenforceable now without our tax money. Obviously, I don't even know why I have to repeat this. And also, I'm getting kind of fed up with Measure D being brought up as a failure to the industry. Measure D was a failure. It was way too open. We had a lot of zoning issues. It wasn't going to work. We needed a compromise. So I'm really tired of that being representing how this county voted. But I also want to thank you for revisiting this topic once again and flip-flopping on your positions over my family's livelihood. Why are we here again? Why are you guys discussing a ballot initiative now after you had so many chances before putting my family out of business? Why is this still even a discussion between you guys? I'll tell you why. Because you don't have the spine to live up to your mistakes. Because you know that truth and justice will ultimately prevail. Because deep down, you know you're on the wrong side of history. And you don't want to be the ones to defend that when the curtains are pulled. Because two of you know almost for certain that your days as Calaveras County supervisors are numbered. Get your dirty hands out of my business. We don't need your help. This county was much better off before you and will be better off without you. You gained your positions in an election year with the lowest percentage number of voter turnout in decades. You don't speak for the people nor have the county's best interests in mind as a whole. Just look at the June 6 election results. The people that ran a campaign pro-ban were either defeated or devastatingly defeated by pro-common sense regulation nominees. The day before, we submitted over 2,000 signatures to qualify a recall vote for Mills. We don't want you, and you will be gone soon. And for you other three supervisors, my best advice to you is to let them sink their own ship. Don't go down with them. Mr. Tofanelli, although you were just as much to blame as these two jokers for the position that we're in, you still have a chance at retaining your seat. Stand your ground as the leader of this board and don't allow our government to be hijacked by these crooks who have used lies, deceit, and county tax dollars to push a personal agenda. Backed by yours truly, the unmistakable Bill McManus, who must have nothing else to do but to show up to every public county meeting and blast your emails with his special interest when he's not. Mr. Oliveira, I know you have wanted to put it to the vote for the people for a long time. You have stood by that, and I appreciate your consistency. But Mills is now trying to do this on his terms and clearly in an effort to save his seat. Please don't fall into his trap. We're getting really fed up with these games. Let the justice system play out now, and let us get some qualified leaders on this board who have the guts and wherewithal to actually tackle the problems that we have, truthfully and sensibly. Leaders who don't give up on a problem and decide to brush it under the rug or ban it and hope that it goes away. After all, we elect leaders to help us deal with just that. And now you think it's a good idea to send it to the ballot?
Thank you. Any other public comments?
There's two things that I have in mind. M stands for magnet, and M stands for marijuana. And marijuana is a magnet for crime. And Sunday night, or Sunday afternoon, or whenever it was, the really horrible things that happened. And everyone's trying to sweep that under the rug. I can't believe it. We had 18 months to regulate, and nothing happened. A few people were busted, some of the larger grows. And the same thing is happening now. We have a whole bunch of grows, and nothing's being done about it. An occasional bust, and it may look good for the sheriff, but it is not good for our county. If we're going to have regulations, we need to have regulations, and they did not regulate. It did not work, and now we have an issue in front of us again about whether to ban and put it to the public. I'm not against putting it to the public, and I understand the fear out here that if you put it to the public, that it's going to get voted for, because the public does not want the change in our county that has occurred. And it breaks my heart to see things change in such a drastic way. I sympathize with the people that are trying to make a living, and I just hope that they turn their back on this and try to find something else to make a living on. So I've personally been intimidated and heckled, and I've seen other people very fearful because they have been intimidated too. And you guys know what I'm talking about. And that's what you have to face if we keep this.
Neil McEwen, approved legal family farmer. I'm not paid, and I'm not Big Pot. Your bigotry is so hypocritical. When it came to declaring Calaveras a non-sanctuary county, the collective reasoning was people should immigrate legally and follow the law. You still chose not to go after those that deliberately did not register, but those that tried. When it came to enforcing the UO, you were as exclusive as possible and chose to systematically deny as many people as possible that wanted to participate. Well, maybe your bigotry is not as hypocritical as I first thought. When it came to enforcing the UO, I messed that up. Now you have banned the people that cooperated the most and label us all the same, criminals. Where is the justice and equality, the right to freedom, and the pursuit of liberty here in Calaveras? Now you have reverted this county to a purely black market. Where is the list of illegal growers? How many gang and cartel members have been eradicated and arrested over the past 2 years? Are these not the undesirables the citizens want removed the most? Why have you not targeted the most egregious offenders, the ones that never even registered or paid taxes? You have effectuated a reality that is inviting criminals into the county. There are people so unafraid of consequences, they're setting up shop on Main Street in San Andreas, right around the corner.
You are responsible for the state revoking temp licenses that would have allowed legally grown cannabis from going to the legal market, forcing it into the black market, and inviting gang members from around the country to take advantage of the situation. Criminals that don't think twice about murdering. You have created this reality after dragging your feet long enough to take our tax money. I commend you for taking so much time to choose the most backward-thinking, corrupt, and manipulative alternative. You must continue your exceptionally strong leadership and own your decision to ban and all of its negative impacts. I'll let it go.
A couple of things. Let the record show that the person or one or two people that was adjudicated by our local court to have deliberately mislead our voters objects to being called a liar. It's pretty obvious to a lot of people what the motivation was. Mike, you didn't answer Jack's question. He asked why. You didn't answer it. Instead, you asked him to explain why he's against it. I think that betrays your state of mind in all of this. Gary, if this board is determined to put the ban on the ballot, advisory, binding, whatever it is, I would urge you to work with maybe Mike and Jack and put up a reasonable alternative that's real. In other words, don't put up a crappy regulation that nobody will vote for and call that a viable choice. If you really got to do this, I mean, if there's 3 votes, it's going to force this vote on the ban. Put up a decent counter ordinance proposal and then let a real choice be made. A real choice. All right? Not a lousy ordinance for regulation that nobody will support up against a ban. That would be stacking the deck. If we take you guys at your word, I believe Mike. He really wants to know what the people say. I'm sure of it, because I know he's an honorable guy. But I believe that, and I would also urge Mike, that if this is going to go with the ban on the ballot, put up a reasonable regulation for the people to make a reasonable vote up or down on either one and see where it lands. Now, there's another issue which I asked a couple of staff members today about, and that is that we never saw the ordinance that the EIR was done on. Okay, we had a draft ordinance from February 2016. The EIR was commissioned on it. That ordinance was never presented to anybody with the mitigation measures inserted. In other words, you guys, in my opinion, had a duty to take that ordinance, put in the mitigation measures, and take a look at that as a viable option. That didn't happen. So my suggestion is, I don't know what they're going to do, but if there's 3 or 4 votes to put the ban on the ballot, put a fair regulation on the ballot, not one that's 100 acres or beyond anything anyone can vote on. And then we have a real choice. We have a real answer from the voters. And then, game on, more elections. Thank you.
We're going to take a 10-minute break so we can change the DVD.